Left channel, right channel, center.
VTuber 一問一答自己紹介
Yeah, and the tape's
それじゃあ
rolling.
行くよせーのお名前は
Katt Phloxworthy.
呼び方は
Just Cat is fine.
あなたは何系 VTuber?
Nerdy cat girl who features spaceflight.
誕生日は
May 4th.
年齢は
Older than Pneumatic.
性別は
Transgender
身
female.
長は
4'11".
出身は
Sacramento County.
チャームポイントは
Dialogue hair clip.
突然ですがモノマネどうぞ
Yeah, what's up, Dad?
活動場所は
Twitch, Twitter, YouTube.
はじめの挨拶
Thank you for joining me.
終わりの挨拶
Bye.
推しマークは
Not at present.
配信タグは
Catlight feed.
ファンアートは
Cat pics.
ファンネームは
Cat's apprentices.
好きな色は
Iris Indigo.
好きなことは
Vintage computers and
得
video.
意なことは
Technology.
ここで一言愛の告白好
I love you.
きな食べ物は
Ethnic foods.
好きな飲み物は
Craft soda.
好きな漫画は
Pizza 10.
好きなアニメは
Planet.
好きなゲームは
Left 4 Dead 2.
好きな音楽は
Classic rock.
苦手なことは
Human stupidity.
尊敬するのは
Space fairy people.
叶えたい夢は
ISS crew
最後にみん
interview.
なに一言どう
Thanks
ぞ
so much for your support and a final status check.
Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
Go Katt Phlox.
You have permission to launch.
3, 2, 1. RD-180 ignition. Booster ignition and liftoff of Atlas V and Centaur. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me. Hi, Katt Phloxworthy here. We are at the brink of the launch of a new rocket type, New Glenn. This has been a very long time coming. Hello, KF16. How are you over on Twitch? I hope everybody's having a great evening this today. Assuming you're up watching this right now. We are getting ready to head down to Launch Complex 36 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where a New Glenn sits on the pad, getting ready to make its first flight. So we'll see how things go. I think it's been rescheduled multiple times in recent memory. But then again, some of it also came down to me just misreading Twitter. And hello, Terran Zero over on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming on in. We are getting ready to head over to Launch Complex 36, where New Glenn sits on the pad, ready to spread its wings for its first flight. Interestingly enough that I say wings because its Blue Origin's logo happens to be a feather. And of course, the other thing that the New Glenn has that New Shepard also has that New Shepard does, and that's aero surfaces at the base of the booster, because they're going to try and touch. I believe they're going to try and touch it down. I'm not sure if they're going to touch it down on land or they're going to try and do a soft splashdown like they've been doing with Super Heavy before its first attempt with the chopsticks. So anyway, and speaking of Starship and Super Heavy, the next flight, IFT-7 is tomorrow, and T0 is NET 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. over in Texas, which is where, of course, it's going to be launching from. Unfortunately, I will not be able to cover that live. We might do that as a replay. We'll see how things go. Going to be a ship landing. Okay, so I couldn't remember that. But I do remember now that you mention it that they're looking at putting it down on something resembling a drone ship. So we shall see. Coverage is already underway. So we're going to go join Blue Origin in just a sec here. I need to unmute this, and then we're going to go and switch over. Stand by.
Hardware is a tradition at Blue. From the New Shepard propulsion module panels to the crew capsule-based heat shield, those engines on New Glenn have our signatures. Now, the nice thing about those 7-meter fairings that are over 60 feet tall is that it can fit the signatures of more than 10,000 employees that currently call Blue Origin home. And so that's what we're sending to space in addition to the hardware. And this team right here, they made it happen.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Can't wait to check in.
And they were also saying when I was listening to a little bit of the coverage earlier is that they actually build the boosters on site. We're excited that New Origin is going for the drone ship landing on the first try. Yeah, indeed.
Eddie and Maggie can bring to the show. Let's take a little deeper dive into the mission today.
So there is a lot. Right now, we are tracking a number of technical milestones between now and liftoff, and then there's going to be another set of critical in-flight milestones once we're underway. Now, we do want to be very clear about our objectives today. This is New Glenn's first flight, and we prepared.
It's carrying a micro payload. Yeah, I was wondering what it was going to be carrying.
No amount of ground testing or mission simulation is a replacement for flying this rocket in space.
Yep, that is absolutely true.
Our key objective today is to reach orbit safely. Anything beyond that is icing on the cake, bonus points, cherries on Sundays, whatever you want to call it. We know that landing the booster
that's going to be a highly elliptical orbit.
The Atlantic is ambitious, but you can't win if you don't.
Yeah, 19,000. That's much of the way toward where they would have geostationary orbit, which is about 35,000 kilometers.
Apply that knowledge to our next launch, both, of course, in the design of the vehicle, but also into the operations. And about that booster, again, yes, we are going for it.
Yes, this blue ring thing.
New Shepard
it's
landed
bizarre
on only its
how
second
little I've
attempt
heard about it.
in November of 2015.
Microsatellite.
I happened to be on the ground for that.
Microsatellite bus, okay.
Texas, back in the day, and it was wild. And man, I can't wait to see if we can make some more history here with New Glenn, which our booster today has been named with a pretty cool name. You wanna tell us that?
Sure is. Our booster's named So You're Telling Me There's a Chance.
Classic 90s movie reference there.
Oh, interesting name. I've never heard of this.
But let's level set here. You think we're going to stick the landing? Like if you were a betting lady in Las Vegas this evening?
So we think it's possible. You know, the truth is that this is an enormous goal. We're trying to land a giant building-sized vehicle that's plummeting down from space.
And it's not as tall as it's not as tall as Starship and Super Heavy, and not nearly as Corollian as terms of its inspiration as to how many engines to have. 33 or 34 versus the 7 engines that are on this one.
NG-2 and beyond. Now, that said, if we land this thing, I'm going to lose my mind.
You and me both.
I think we'll all lose our minds collectively when you get right down to it, because doing that on the first try would be insane.
This evening is the
on the first launch, even.
We have early technology demonstration on board for Blue Ring. And as mentioned before, it is something that I'm very excited about because it's related to the program.
And there's the interior of the payload fairing.
There it is on the left side of your screen there, sitting nice and ready to go in the payload fairing. But to be clear, what you're looking at, this is not Blue Ring itself. This is not the Blue Ring spacecraft itself. It is a pathfinder for the Blue Ring vehicle. And so the vehicle, the Blue Ring vehicle that we are building currently employs a lot of the same technologies.
Yeah, that's true.
And
first thing it has to do is make it past Max Q,
put in that vehicle that you
which itself is a milestone. And that flame on the right-hand side is the evaporating LCH4 that I believe is being burned off, much like LH2 on various liquid hydrogen-fueled missions. It could even be liquid hydrogen itself.
Throughout the mission as it powers on and it begins collecting data. For the broader system we're building, for the Blue Ring itself, you can think
Be
of
giving off the pad and
Blue
clearing the
Ring as
tower as a
utility
milestone.
vehicle,
That is
a
true.
multi-tool
That is
kind of
absolutely
a-
true because
a mobile
Vanguard
service
never had a
station
chance to do
that we
that. It
can
didn't
use
even
to
lift
run
off. It
errands
tipped over
around the
and
solar
exploded, which was
Today, on
America's
this
first
mission,
attempted
it's a
rocket launch
physical
of any
pathfinder
kind
for
headed to
that
space
vehicle that will be flying.
in
We
an
have
orbital
some exciting
capacity.
details to share a little later on. We're going to get way in depth on the exact technology.
Ultimately,
that we're testing
Explorer
today,
1
as
would
well
be
as
our first
Blue
orbital
Ring.
payload.
But I'll tell you right now, I am super excited about not just the launch, but the payload, and for both, you know, the New Glenn team and the Blue Ring team. So much work has come together.
I think there should
today.
be a separate
And
LH2
that's why
burn-off stack somewhere
today
out
is
there.
such a big deal.
Somewhere
We're going
there,
to be laying the
or maybe I'm
foundation
mixing it up
of
with
our
Vulcan's
mission to
launch
build a road
complex.
to
If
space
I'm
for
not
the
sure.
benefit of Earth.
That is true
Such an
because
exciting launch.
just
So
like
much
just like
to aim
Vulcan
for.
Centaur,
Yes.
Blue
Level
Origin's
setting at the end of the
New
day,
Glenn
we
has an
know that
LA
we're in this for the
has a
long term. Today
Hydrolox
is
powered
just
second stage.
Day one,
In this case,
the
powered by
beginning
two
of a new chapter for New Glenn.
BE3Us.
We're going to collect a significant amount
Also, was
of
there
data, no
there was
matter
also the
what
rocket
happens.
that lost an engine
and from
and
our
went
perspective,
sideways?
the way I like to
Oh
put it,
yeah, I
data
remember
is the
seeing that
currency of
one.
success. The more data we have, the better off we are. The
Oh,
longer we
yeah.
fly, the more data we collect, the more we can crunch on, so we can reinvest back into New Glenn for New Glenn 2 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And that data is really going to be
And
critical for our
for those of us
engineers
joining
and our
us,
ability
joining me,
to
this
evolve
is
New Glenn
the
into a
maiden flight
fully
of New
operational
Glenn,
program.
which is a
You know, we've
two-stage
discovered we've flown
orbital
28
class rocket,
missions so far, and we've
much
sent
like
over 40
SpaceX's Falcon
astronauts
9,
to space.
and as
And
well
while we
as the
consider that
Super Heavy
system fully
component of
operational, that
Starship
flight
and
data
Super
that we
Heavy.
get after
It
every
is also
mission
the first
helps
stage
our
is
engineers
designed to be
fine-tune the
reused.
system.
Apparently, the
It
second
helps us
stage at this
refine our
point is
procedures,
expendable, much
reduces the
like
overall time
Falcon
to
9s and
launches,
Falcon Heavy's
and
second
perhaps
stage.
most important of all, it
Astro's rockets, they
significantly drives down the
made
cost
some
of space
interesting
And we have
media
learned
to say
so
that, yeah,
much
they
as New Shepard has
did.
progressed. And by the way,
Asteroid rockets
those
had never
learnings
had. I thought they
all
had
come into
like
play
one or two.
on New Glenn. We've integrated
At
a
most?
lot of design and operational lessons from New Glenn, from New Shepard into New Glenn. So
Yeah, it also
and
bears
speaking of
noting that the
lessons learned
engine that powers
from
the
New
second
Shepard,
stage, the
there's that
BE3,
recurring Blue Origin
is
theme of
the
reusability.
same stage
New
is the
Shepard
same is the
has,
same engine
with
that
its
powers
booster,
New Shepard,
of
which
course,
is the
one that
suborbital
lands,
rocket,
right? New Glenn,
named
the
for
same
Alan
deal.
Shepard,
But
the United
let's
States'
point out
first
one big difference. New
first
Shepard lands
human
on a landing pad
to launch
in the
into
desert, while
space.
New Glenn's landing pad is out in
And
the
he
Atlantic
sat
Ocean.
atop a
take
Mercury
moment to
Redstone
know,
vehicle,
you know, the oceans,
and
the seas out there have been
his
quite
flight, as
rough
well as
for the
Gus
last
Grissom's,
several days. So,
which was the
you know,
second
that
one,
is why we took a little bit of extra time to get a
those
really
lasted
good
about maybe
chance of landing
25
the
minutes
booster
total.
tonight. So a big kudos to our team that is out there operating the Jacqueline.
They use an aerospike like thing on the
with
second
waves
stage
out there
of the
for
rocket.
several
Oh,
days, but
interesting.
Things are
What's your
gonna
opinion
get,
on the
exciting this evening?
on Stoke Space?
Now,
I have not heard of them. I'd have to go take a look at them.
landing system is the landing.
And
ship,
but yeah, that's
which we
that's
call
the
the
interesting thing
Jacqueline.
about
Can I
the
talk
first
a little
stage of
bit
New
more about
Glenn.
Jacqueline?
Unlike
So we've
SpaceX,
actually
which
named our
uses
landing platform after
grid
a very
fins that
special
deploy
Blue Origin family member, the
at the
Jacqueline.
very last. I mean,
Right now,
after
out at sea,
separation
a
during
total of
a
100
during a
miles
re,
from Cape
a
Canaveral,
recovery
and the crew that's operating the
recovery enabled
Jacqueline is
flight
actually
of
positioned
Falcon
nearby
9,
in this
and the
different
entire
vessel.
flight of
That's
a
prudent,
super heavy
President.
flight.
Just saying.
Oh, there's there's their
We're also gonna
essentially
have-
their
there
drone
it is.
ship. It looks
And we
it
also
is
have a lot of
huge.
cameras on
That
our
deck
ship
is
today.
big, and the
We
name of that
expect
is
to be able
Jacqueline.
to watch it live
Another
as
fun
our
fact: the
booster
BE3U
touches
uses
down,
the
and that's just gonna be so cool.
expander bleed. Yeah, that's right.
It is
Basically,
gonna be
it
such a
takes
pivotal
gases
moment.
from the combustion
Our first
engine
landing
and
attempt
uses
of
that
this
to run the
rocket.
turbo pump once
We've gotta make sure
once
that
the
that
cycle
gets
is started. And there's a live
regardless
picture
of
from
what
the
happens. And there's a live
from the deck
shot
of Jacqueline, which
of
will
beautiful
hopefully
landing pad there
receive
with
the
our
land
Blue Origin
the landing
cover.
first stage
Just waiting to,
booster of New Glenn.
Welcome home a rocket from space. No big deal.
And after that
Similar
booster
to a lot of
lands on the
Japanese rocket
Jacqueline,
engines,
the
apparently
vessel is
its
gonna
turbine
transport the
configuration
booster back
resembles
to our
old
facilities
Japanese
here at
prototype
Rocket
hydrogen
Park.
engines from
We're
the
gonna do an inspection before
1980s or
flying
so.
again, and this is of course very important
Stoke Space's
because
rocket will have a
Heard us sing this tune
combined
before. Reusable
aerospike heat
vehicles are
shield
how
for
we will
full reuse of the
radically
rocket.
reduce the
Oh,
cost of
interesting.
access to space.
Because
Now, I hope
getting
you're all
something
out
from
there getting a
getting
sense
something
of
from
the
orbital
set features
velocity
that make up
to
today's
reentry
launch.
velocity,
We've got
that
the
is
vehicle
hard.
itself. We've
That is the
got
reason why you
ground
don't see the
systems,
second stage
but we've
of
also got the
Falcon 9 get
sea-based
reused.
system. And of course, all of the people, the
So,
teammates across.
And
the
I don't know
states
exactly
and the
what the
US,
flight
frankly,
profile
are
is,
looking
but I
to
know
get
I imagine it's
to our
probably going to be at least 2 to
Now,
4
let's
minutes
take a moment
for the
and
first
talk to
stage.
New Glenn on the pad
And then the
as we
second
make
stage,
our
of
way
course,
towards the
will
very
probably
first
be
orbital
anywhere
flight
between 6
for Blue Origin.
6 to 12 minutes to bring it all the way up to orbital speed. And there's the vehicle on the pad. Also, the heat shield will be liquid active cooled rather than ablative. Ah, interesting. That's a new one, because Starship uses much the same technology that's on the space shuttle, and as a matter of fact, a lot of the cooling system, even on Orion, was designed based on this on the shuttles. If you'd like to give I'm sorry, I'm reading my own darn thing. Stokes' approach certainly seems interesting, although it's cool that they want to jump straight to full reusability. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to see, especially if it's going to be actively liquid cooled, because I've never heard of an actively liquid cooled heat shield before. Just those stuff that you've seen on the space shuttle, and of course on Starship, and of course, as always, the ablative heat shields that we see on Starship. On Dragon, and of course the ill-fated Starliner. I remember one of the old concepts for Starship and or its predecessors called for liquid cooling, liquid active cooling too, but at some point those got replaced with ceramic tiles. That's what they're using now. Of course, is that I never knew.
We are officially at T-minus 38 minutes and 57 seconds to go until launch, our first launch of New Glenn.
Now that is interesting, though.
As we go along,
yeah, we're at minus 8 minutes.
You might see our clock bounce around a little bit.
Oh,
That's
it looks like
they've
actually changed the.
And making sure that by the time we get down to 0, everybody's set and ready to go. But talking about ready to go, Denise, why don't you give us an update on the vehicle and its preparedness?
Absolutely. So our team has already completed fueling up New Glenn's propellant tanks for both our first stage and our second stage. We are now entering the next step, which is called propellant conditioning. This is, of course, a crucial step because we need to make sure that those propellants are at the right temperatures and at the right pressures. We also need to manage pressure. You might have noticed that there's a lot of excess gases that are being vented from our first stage and our second stage. This is because our cryogenic propellants are so cold that they're experiencing something called a boil-off. So we are venting all that excess gas. Yep,
that's exactly what's happening there. And that's why they moved LCH3 or LCH4 or LH2 out to a bunch of pipes out there, and then they burn it off into the atmosphere. That way they don't experience a buildup of potentially explosive gas. And if you have it in stoichiometric quantities, then it's a real problem. Then it really is explosive.
As we make our way to terminal
and of course, the liquid oxygen does that all the time, and you see those little clouds coming off the vehicle like that. That is exactly what's happening. That's boil off. And they always keep replenishing the liquid oxygen, and then of course liquid methane. They have to be very careful, just like with liquid hydrogen. But it's probably not nearly as bad as liquid hydrogen. But apparently liquid hydrogen is so sparse in terms of its or more like undense, as Tim Dodd would put it. They actually had to put helium into the turbopump joints to make sure that basically using positive pressure to keep all the hydrogen out of the turbopumps. So then, because if it manages to hit oxygen, bam, it's game over right there.
8 miles away, we have LC-36, where New Glenn is standing proudly, waiting for its first launch.
Flight 7 is going to test a tile that uses liquid active cooling. That'll be interesting to see how that works. Because otherwise, if it's on the, I guess I was just thinking to myself, what's the difference as far as weight between that liquid cooling and, say, the ceramic heat shield, tiles? Because those things, from my understanding, are really light.
Operation is also right in the heart of all this great space history here in Florida.
So the Atlas II and Atlas III launches took place from here. The Mariner, Pioneer, and even Surveyor missions. They sent
Surveyor was America's first vehicle to head to actually touch down on. I think it's on the moon. I was mistaking that for Viking. My mistake. Viking was our first vehicle that landed on Mars.
it's just an honor to be launching a next generation vehicle right here on top of all of that history. And the launch pad is so close.
And look at that. Look at how big that is compared to everyone else on the ground.
In this building. I mean, I literally would not be surprised if lights start shaking.
Just like with Falcon 9 and
we can watch and hear just about
with Falcon 9 and Rocket Labs Electron, it's integrated horizontal and erected vertical.
Glenn, maybe one of the loudest ever. For one, the pad is just so close to Rocket Park, but also there's just the enormous size and power of those 7 first-stage BE4 engines.
And we have been talking about that rumble for years.
And speaking of the BE4, unlike the Raptor, Raptor 2, and Raptor 3 that Starship and Super Heavy use,
this is going to be awesome.
which those use what is called full flow staged combustion, where they use every last bit of propellant. All of it will ultimately find its way into the main combustion chamber and out the nozzle. This uses I believe, a closed.
So many people gathered to watch launches from these
a closed flow oxygen-rich cycle, much like the Russian rockets use, such as the RD-170, RD-180, RD-190, and RD-191.
On the desk with you, Denise. You guys are going to get to see and feel
Feels like a lot of the old
ballistic
missile configurations are getting a new lease on life.
Other than
with today's commercial space industries. How fun! Yes, exactly. Northrop Grumman's doing that with the Minotaur missiles. That's what they have both the Minotaur launch vehicles. Many of those are former Minuteman missiles.
The southeast region of the U.S. You see this image right here. Look, that's going all the way as far north as North Carolina. Several states north are going to.
And of course, that doesn't exactly apply to us because I'm completely on the other side of the country.
A little bit of a guide here. If you guys
how long
are
is left on launch time?
It's a bit late here on the East
originally,
Coast,
this was going to be at 10
launch,
p.m.,
so shout out to you guys
but apparently they are now.
that are watching live
it's actually
from
going to be
the
about
East
half an hour from now.
All right, everybody.
So they're calling there's the countdown timer is showing T-minus 33 minutes 25 seconds as of right now.
To our launch window opening at T-0 for New Glenn's first launch. Denise, I cannot believe I'm saying that. We've been talking about this such a long time. It's
the window is opening right around that time.
This is our first flight. We have prepared rigorously for it, but I want to reiterate.
Let me take a look here. Hang on.
Our key objective today is to reach orbit safely. That in itself is a big deal, and anything beyond that is a bonus. That said, we also know that landing the booster would be very cool. We also know that it is very ambitious. I'm
going to go take a look at Blue Origin's
we're going for it. And
X page and see what's going on over there.
We are going to learn a lot. We're going to refine. We're going to apply that knowledge to our next launch and beyond. It is an exciting day, and we are so glad that you, our audience, is here to join in on all the action and all the excitement. Okay, while we've got a moment, we've got this beautiful rocket on the pad on our screen. Why don't we dive in a little bit deeper on New Glenn? Denise, our expert.
Let's see what they have to say about this.
Why don't we dig in, give our audience a sense of what sets this vehicle, New Glenn, apart from other launch vehicles, both past and present?
Well, to start, it's just massive, just over 320 feet tall, or almost 98 meters. And just think
a little
about
bit more
that.
than
That's
a football
like a
field tall.
32-story building.
Not as tall as,
really
like I said, not as tall as
another way to think about it,
as Starship and Super Heavy, but certainly not small either.
One on top of the other, and that's approximately the height of New Glenn.
And that's remarkable. When you
New
think
Shepherds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a little bit more of a sixth.
New Glenn. Just that size. Oh, there you go. You see this great image on our screen here that gives you a sense.
And one of the things I was thinking about earlier is I don't know if they're going to do the same thing that ULA does with their 2 BE4s at the base of Vulcan. I don't know if they're going to use a ROFI system, ROFI radial outward firing igniters, which basically burn off any excess gases that may have accumulated down there. Because the minute you get oxygen in there in appreciable quantities, notably from the first stage's engine for the first stage's tanks, that could turn things stoichiometric, and things would just go significantly sideways in just about every single conceivable direction, as well as up.
Moonlanders, other large vehicles that are similar in size to New Shepard, you know, it is incredible that fairing volume and the size, what it's going to enable as we build this road to space. Now, it's not often that you get to stand next to a massive rocket like that on a launch pad, ready to go.
Let's see what that looks like.
You and I had an amazing opportunity. This is
that is
a day or two ago.
Immense.
And I don't know, I just look at
And
this
more than
video
likely, they
and
will
I
do
get
the exact
giggles.
same thing
It
like
was
every other place does.
incredible.
Every
to
other
be
rocket
at the base
launch site
and
does, and that
looking
is
at
use
what
a
our team
deluge
has worked
system,
on
which
for
puts
such a long
enormous
time.
amounts
You
of
see the
water
flame trench,
on at the base
smoke
of the
and fire,
pad
baby. That's what we're looking for
to
tonight.
soak up
It
some of
feels
that
every time I
acoustic
watch
energy
that.
and
I
turning
mean,
it
that
into
was
steam
just
and heat.
So incredible. That's not something that I will likely forget anytime soon. It's just so tall when you're standing right next to it.
Yeah. Well, that tall rocket is going to space tonight. And you all are going to be here to watch and cheer on with us. It's a big night. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll give you a key differences between a vehicle like New Glenn and others that have lifted off from this pad in the past. I think there's another key thing about New Glenn, and it really is that reusability aspect. So while the scale of New Glenn
and of course, like I
is
said,
truly
they actually
remarkable,
use
I mean,
aero
this rocket is
surfaces
built
on
for
there,
big things, supersized,
actual
with an
solid
incredible
aero
lift
surfaces, much like you
capability.
see on New
But
Shepard.
to do that in a way that's sustainable, using reusable hardware, I think that for me is the biggest innovation for New Glenn.
100%. Reusability. It is such a critical component of reducing the costs of future access to space. You just can't say enough how important reusability is.
Yeah, and
so
that
Glenn
has
also
definitely
that
driven the
second
cost
stage
of launches
rocket,
down,
right? We talked
especially
about the
for
first stage and the second
SpaceX.
stage, and you know, rocket fans
And
know this, but
SpaceX
just
is
like
ultimately
Saturn
going for the
V or
more
other big
complete
launchers,
reusability of the
rockets
entire
fly the
vehicle
first stage and the
with,
second stage,
with of course,
job of
Starship.
The first stage, or sometimes what we call the booster, to lift the vehicle from Earth up to space. The stages will then separate.
And it's almost
second stage
as tall,
that
minus
powers our
the
payload
launch
into
escape
orbit.
system
So here you see a
of
cool,
Saturn
again, another
V. My
cool
goodness.
overlay. Oh, you saw it just a moment ago of the Saturn V rocket. I mean, we are just about the same height, like, and the power of the two vehicles and the significance to be compared to that is amazing. And you know what? Our game plan, like Saturn V, our game plan is to use New Glenn to go to the moon too. I hope you host that webcast with me too on that
And
one.
interestingly, between of the Mercury
so that's our orbital rocket
astronauts,
in a
I know
nutshell.
at least one of them has
Now,
certainly
while
gone to
we've
the moon.
got
That
a
would be
couple
Alan
minutes to go,
Shepard.
we're at
He
T-minus
actually
28 minutes
famously
to go until New Glenn's first launch.
famously
why don't we check in with our teammates
struck a golf ball
over
on the
at
moon.
Cars Park. Eddie, you there?
Yeah, hey Ariane, we're here at Cars Park. We're less than 6 miles as the crow flies to Launch Complex 36. We can see a great view of New Glenn standing 320 feet tall, the two vehicle access towers, one of the largest water towers in the world, and we are ready. Aren't we ready, team?
Yep, you can definitely tell their enthusiasm is very much go for launch.
Eddie, man, you have quite the crowd down there, and I feel like it's grown exponentially since we saw you last. And not just current employees, but their kids and future Blue Origin employees are all out there psyched for this first flight.
We've got our New Glenn patch.
What are you hearing the employees talk about?
So listen, we're looking forward to the rumble of the BE4 engine. We're going to hear it. We're looking forward to the blue streak across the dark sky. And we've got, you know, the flags, the emblems, the swag. We're very proud to be here. We're very proud to be sharing this moment with our community. Right? The word that everybody keeps using tonight is grateful. How grateful we are to be here, how grateful we are for each other, and how grateful we are for the Space Coast that has accepted us.
So a lot of these folks have day jobs here in the factory, and you're not far from us, but describe the view you're getting. How is it different from what people will see from here at Rocket Park?
Yeah, we've got an unencumbered view of the launch pad of New Glenn. We'll be able to see that arc as Blue Ring heads on its mission, and we're very excited about that. The air is electric here. We're just buzzing with excitement, and we're thrilled to be here, really.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little jealous that you guys are going to get such a straight-on view of the launch pad. Oh, not complaining. Denise and I have a pretty great seat here too, but thank you, Eddie. We'll be checking in back soon with you there again down at Cars
We've got
Park.
one more chant for you guys. We're going to get loud for you.
Wow, I love it. I love it. You feel the energy down there. I absolutely love it. Now, one employee on the New Glenn team that is not down there with Eddie, and I do want to give a special call out to our program leader for New Glenn, Jarrett Jones. Jarrett has led the New Glenn program for years, and I'm very grateful to be able to call him a friend. He has a deep background in
there you go,
aerospace.
the 7 BE4s at the base of the first stage.
Through the build up to today's launch. I mean, there you see him just a moment ago, and let's see. Can we point him out here in launch control? Yes, he is there, kind of that first row, bottom left. There you go, checking in, got his eyes glued to his screen, talking to
I think I see him.
Long-term core employees here. We got Mark Featherstone, who has been also leading this program for a long time, and man, and you saw that image just a moment ago with him in front of the New Glenn. That was the day that we installed the 7 engines on New Glenn for the first time, and I'm pretty sure he is absolutely psyched. You also see the gentleman in the center of that front row in the green sweatshirt. That is Dave Limp, our CEO, who joined us just about a year ago. And man, talk about sparking some fire. It has been wonderful to have him on the team with us. And he's clearly absolutely dialed in. And last but not least, in between Jarrett and Dave, Jeff Bezos, our founder.
There he is.
Who, of course, has been thinking about this day for many years. And I should also throw in a special happy birthday to Jeff. What a day. I wouldn't mind having a rocket launch on my birthday, but this man deserves it. So much patience, commitment, passion for what we're doing.
It also bears noting that it was thanks to Jeff Bezos and his Blue Origin that the oldest person to ever go to space, whether in orbital capacity or at all, William Shatner went up thanks to him by way of New Shepard.
New Glenn. That's why today is so important. Okay, everybody, we're at T-minus 23 minutes to go until launch. It is so great to have you all joining us for today's inaugural launch. We have folks tuning in from all over for this big day, and of course we had Eddie and the team down at Cars Park. But we also wanted to give a nod to a couple special groups watching from across the nation. We've got employees tuned in at multiple sites, checking in.
Yeah, because I imagine a lot of the supply chain within Blue Origin is all over the country.
Work on multiple programs. There we go. We got Kent. We got
Huntsville, Alabama hosts a lot of different things, including there's also a NASA Space Flight Center. I believe the Stennis Space Flight Center is over there.
Huntsville, where we build all of our engines, our BE4s, our BE3Us, and of course, Blue Ring. You guys should be so proud.
Your team spirits. Oh, I just know that everybody here has worked so hard for this and cannot wait for the next 22 minutes. Hi, everyone.
And our team down in Huntsville, our beautiful engine factory. You guys are just the best. Just the best. Well, you can see the passion, the energy. We have been working so hard to get to this point. All right, well, I can't complain about our view from right here. We have got a pretty sweet spot here, but I do want to go upstairs to our co-host, Maggie, who's up near Mission Control. Maggie, you there?
Here, and I have found
Let's see
a
what
new
they're doing
place
over
to
there.
hang out.
Wow, all right, so I know that not only do you get to hang out near Mission Control, but this, for our audience, gives you a sense of how close they are to just being able to
Marshall
go
SFC
outside
is in,
on the deck there.
Oh, it's Marshall, okay.
Tell me about this
Space
view
Flight
that,
Center is in
that
Alabama.
you get and that some of our
Stennis
VIPs
is in
are going to get
Mississippi.
tonight.
Yeah, I couldn't remember which one was which, but anyway, yeah.
on the
I know
third
the,
floor
and of course,
our rocket
Space
factory.
Camp
And just
is
out
or
there,
was
you can
in
see
Huntsville.
the red blinking light at the top of our tower. So the launch pad is right out there.
I have to wonder how
and
many
then
people
just to my
ultimately
left here
found
is the
themselves
mission
as
control
astronauts
team.
thanks to the
So you know
thanks
when
to
that
Space
rocket
Camp back
goes up,
back when it was
they'll
in
be
its heyday.
turning their heads briefly to the right. So we're out here, we've got some guests, VIPs, some of our Blue family inside. They're still in there while it's warm, but I expect to see more and more people headed out here soon.
Now, Maggie, I know you're able to also listen in on the radio with the team behind you. What are some of the things that you're hearing?
Sure. About this time in the count, I am hearing them going.
We're coming
into
up on
their
T-minus
weather
20
brief.
minutes.
They are making sure
prior
that
to
everything
launch.
is clear downrange. That's both the water and in the air. And I haven't heard
that's
anything
good.
thus far, Ariane.
A clear range is
Maggie.
always a good
So
thing. Here we
great
go.
to have
T-minus
you
20
up there,
minutes
keeping us
and
tuned into all of the action.
counting.
As we noted, we've got launch control and mission control right back to back.
And of course,
We'll be,
tanking
checking in again
operations
with you in a couple
continue
of
with
minutes.
LCH4 and LO2 going
Okay, we're
into
at
the
T-minus
first stage and
19
LH2 and
minutes
LO2 on the
58
second
seconds
stage.
to go until our targeted liftoff. So we're getting closer and closer. And we want to point out a few things coming up ahead in our countdown, because some of them actually come in a pretty quick sequence.
Yeah, so coming up, we're going to have a planned weather check. This is where our teams take one last look at the weather for launch today.
Since you
This
mentioned that, I'm
weather
going to
check
hit
validates that our
Patrick Space Force
trajectory's still on
Space's
track, and the team will
thing on that.
continue to
It'll be
close
just a
out
sec
any
here.
remaining open items that could be on their dashboard.
The very capable folks in launch control upstairs will undoubtedly be checking through closeouts over the next few minutes or so. And once we get through those, we'll start to go into some final vehicle checks. So do you want to walk us through those final vehicle checks?
Once we get to about T-4 terminal count, we're going to transition New Glenn into where our auto sequence begins. And the operation really becomes hands-off for our operators. We're going to be switching New Glenn to internal power, internal hydraulics, and things will move really quickly from there.
And then, as we approach the final moments, and just before we light the engines, there's this water deluge.
It's a huge water deluge. This is going to engulf the flame trench completely, which is going to protect our rocket from vibroacoustic and thermal loading. Finally, autopilot will be enabled. We'll flex the gimbaling engines, and then
And probably also do the
ignition.
aero surfaces as
Game
well.
on, ignition. I cannot wait for that moment. So all of this is very exciting, even to just hear said out loud. I think there's also a very specific sequence for starting the first stage engines. And talk us through that, because it's not like they just all turn on at once. We got to be careful about how we sequence the engines igniting.
Correct. So you might
That's-
think
that
we
happens
ignite
on the
all
Space Shuttle
7
and probably
BE4s
on
at once, but
SLS
that's
too.
actually not the case. We do something called a staggered start sequence. Engines 1, 4, and 7 will light first, followed by engines 2, 3, 5, and 6. Now, of course, these will happen in a very quick succession, but the staggering start really helps to decrease the sudden pressure on the whole system. There just truly is so much power in those BE4 engines. So staggering them creates a more smooth on-ramp for all that power.
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about the rocket, but you can't forget the ground system.
Space Shuttle does it
right?
center,
So
I believe,
when
the
we
center
are
engine,
essentially
which is
protecting
the
rocket from
apex
the
there, and then
vibration and all that
left and
power
right on
coming
the
out of
bottom,
engine,
I think.
we're
I'm not
also
certain.
protecting
No.
the
But
the
again,
launch
it's
pad
also stagger
itself,
started.
right?
And I believe
You
even
see
SLS is
from the
also
mapping
stagger
shows
started
earlier
because there are
how
now
close
4 of those
we are to the
RS-25s
water.
at the base of that.
The water table is just a couple of feet below the launch pad. And I should really talk, a lot of engineering went into the complete refurbishment of our launch complex. And so we want to take care of it. It's there for the long haul. But man, we got a big old powerful rocket. So this water deluge system is critical to both the rocket and the ground, the launch pad, the ground support equipment. Okay, we are at T-minus. We have just had a clock update here. We are at T-minus
Another
37 minutes and 20 seconds to go until launch. As we mentioned, this is kind of what we can expect from our team as they get aligned and ready to go into launch today. So they just need a couple more minutes, and that's A-OK. You know, we say this on the New Shepard webcast as well, which is we have spent years designing this rocket and, you know, months building it and months going into designing this operation. If we need a couple more minutes before we press go on this thing, that is A-okay with all of us. So with that, why don't we take a moment here to check out this beautiful New Glenn rocket on the pad, getting ready for its first mission to space ever.
And we have the transporter erector on the right there. I don't know if they'll actually do much the same thing as SpaceX does, and that is open up the... what they do is open the... what am I trying to say? They open the clamp at the top, which holds the top of the vehicle against the transporter erector, and then angle back the actual erector itself, because they also have to give the umbilicals a bit of space to fall away. Those umbilicals transport stuff like electricity, fuel, oxidizer, gases, and other fluids, and in certain cases air conditioning, sometimes into the interior of the payload fairing, just to make sure everything is properly cooled and ready for launch. So now we're at we're coming up on T-minus 35 minutes, and I think where we see those fins there, those are also on top of an interstage. That is, and of course that would be going around the two BE3 engines at the bottom rather of the second stage, which of course has the payload adapter on the top, and then the payload fairing to allow it to go through there and go through the atmosphere as it ascends. Now the question I'm just thinking about is Blue Origin considering reusing those fairings? Probably not, but SpaceX we know already does, and was rather interesting. Apparently during one of the flights. During one of the early flights where they did not actually recover the fairings, a beachgoer actually found one of the fairing halves and found a GoPro camera, sent it back to SpaceX, and they saw some beautiful footage. And Scott Manley has a video that talks about that because of all the plasma trails that come off those fairing halves as they go down the atmosphere. And from my understanding, they now have... they put thrusters, and I believe I don't know if they even put parachutes on those. But apparently the fairing halves themselves are practically aerodynamic, are pretty aerodynamic for what they are, not just to protect their cargo that they're encasing, but also coming down out of the atmosphere after being used. And they do it, and they actually come down in a way such that they can be reused.
We're at T-minus 33 minutes and 53 seconds to go until New Glenn's first launch. We are so happy to have you all joining us for this historic launch, both here in the U.S. and everywhere around the world. Denise, tell our audience, where are we up to in the preparation of our vehicle?
So right now we're completing a systems functional check for New Glenn, and this is critical because we're ensuring that all of our systems are operating nominally. We're going to verify propulsion, avionics, guidance, communications, and even safety systems. Our engineers are also running diagnostics on all the BE4s and BE3Us. We're checking flight computers, we're checking telemetry. We're also going to do one final comm check. This is really crucial because we want to make sure that we're getting the right data between the rocket and the ground, as well as verifying the signal integrity. Now coming up, we're going to do one last weather check. This is where we get real-time data on wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, cloud cover, lightning, even thunderstorms. Not just for the LC-36 pad, but we're also checking the weather where the Jacqueline is, so that she's ready to receive our booster. So that is where we are
they also
right now.
they also check the range down there to make sure that it's safe.
The weather, we got to take into consideration the
for
weather
the
here, but
for
also
the the booster that's going to be coming in by and large unpowered.
Ship is the Jacqueline. We've mentioned it earlier. Of course, that was one of the reasons why we need to take a little bit more time before getting to launch this evening. The sea state out there was a little rough. They were rocking and rolling. And we want to give our rocket the best chance of coming into land.
And right now,
on the Jacqueline.
I'm just checking out
is the Jacqueline ready
Patrick
to
Space Force Base's 45th
first
Weather
stage
Squadron's
of New
report.
Glenn so we can
They're
take
showing
it
a
back home,
10%
refurbish
chance
it,
of
put another
violation or
payload on top, and
90%
go
go
again.
for launch
But
right
again,
now.
we should reiterate some of our
Thick cloud layer
our
rules is the
objectives for
primary
today.
concern
The
for this one,
primary
but everything
objective
looks very good
is
according to what they're
go
saying.
to space, go to orbit safely. That's number one. And if we happen to land this booster, as we mentioned before, there are going to be a lot of people losing their minds. Mine
Oh, yeah, I
as
can
well.
imagine.
So stay tuned for that. Now, Denise, why don't you go through a little bit more of the flow down there? So the Blue Ring team is up in mission control right now, also surely tracking their own checklist as they make sure the Pathfinder payload is ready to go to launch as well.
Correct.
I just
yeah.
also
so
thought
upstairs at the MC we'll have
to look
a
at
launch
that.
control and
Hopefully,
mission control. So our
hopefully
launch
they
team
don't
is the one
have
that's
to
doing
scrub
all
the
these
days
system
of temp.
checks on New
Tomorrow's
Glenn,
a 60%
while mission
weather
control is making
no-go
sure
for
that they're
launch.
doing
Yeah, I
similar
saw
system
that.
checks for the Blue
I
Ring
saw that.
Pathfinder.
There would be a
Wonderful.
60%
Let's
chance
take
of
a
violation,
second
so
and
yeah,
dig
that
in
would
a little
not be a
bit
good
more
thing.
on that payload. The Pathfinder is a cool piece of technology, and really, it's just the initial demo for a vehicle program called Blue Ring that's quite far along in its own development. And we mentioned this earlier, today's demo is a non-separating payload. This means the payload tonight is going to stay attached to New Glenn's second stage for the entire 6-hour mission. The other thing I want to reiterate about this, this Blue Ring Pathfinder is it's going to be testing a lot of the same technology, but it's not the Blue Ring itself. It's not the same form factor.
Oh, I
but
see.
We're going to learn a lot from this evening. Now, what we want to, excuse me, I should say, as we talk about the Blue Ring Pathfinder, I want to reiterate that it's attached to the second stage, and it will stay there
T-minus 30
as it
minutes
orbits
and
the Earth.
counting.
And that also is not normal.
Assuming
but we
no
wanted
other
to do that
delay,
for
no
today's
other
demo mission. Now,
no
today's
other
demo
time adjustments
mission
have been made,
on the
unless
Pathfinder
they
is going
were
to
to
prove
make
out
it
some important
closer.
components of our future vehicle, Blue Ring. And I get really excited. Clearly, I get so nervous I get excited talking about this. I love this program. It's one that I've had a hand in getting off the ground for the past year as part of Blue's In-Space Systems team. But I want to take you deeper into Blue Ring. Let's check out this video.
This will be interesting. So apparently it's going to be a mock-up, but at the same time not entirely non-operational either.
With one vehicle.
It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of satellites. It does a lot, and it does it really well.
Blue Ring is part of building that base layer of infrastructure in space that we at Blue Origin talk about. We can take up to 13 customers up to space, up to 3 metric tons, deploy those satellites.
It's going to give them all the capability that they need to
Looks
be
like a
able to
satellite
be placed
bus.
where they want, or they can use a lot of the capability inside of Blue Ring.
It can do data storage, data computing, relaying the data.
And it's going to be a massive asset because it now allows all these payload customers to offload all of their data relay and critical processing needs.
You've got space domain awareness, you've got communications capabilities, and then you've also got this ability to host things on Blue Ring itself.
For customers
not
who
just-
need orbit maneuver, we can maneuver them between orbits, within an orbit.
We can have nominally 3,000 meters per second of delta V with this vehicle.
Oh,
and
wow,
in some
that's pretty
configurations,
cool.
all the way up to 4,000 meters per second. And it has dual propulsion systems, meaning that I can use the chemical systems for really fast maneuvers, but then have electric propulsion for all of the station keeping and low energy maneuvers. A lot of our work is going to be done in geostationary orbit for sure. But we've got capabilities to go out to cislunar orbits and interplanetary.
Blue Ring Pathfinder is going to be on our first New Glenn flight, which is really exciting.
This first mission, it demonstrates our space-to-ground interfaces. So it proves out that we can command our vehicle on orbit, can receive data from the vehicle.
We'll be testing out and demonstrating a lot of the capabilities that will be hosted on the Blue Ring vehicle as a whole.
We're building not just the transportation systems through New Glenn, but also the infrastructure that will help future generations take advantage of what space has to offer.
Blue Ring is going to multiply what we can do in space and create the infrastructure like nothing else.
That's pretty cool. Basically, I mean, not just a something that just takes vehicles up there,
but I am pretty
but
excited,
can also be a part of the infrastructure
that
itself.
the team I work with in my day job, Blue Ring, is the team behind the first payload ever on New Glenn.
It is so cool. Thinking about the way a vehicle like Blue Ring will open up access to space. I mean, that's really what it's all about. That key aspect of today's mission is
And
that
also the idea of being able to have both chemical and electrical in there. Basically, the chemical stuff is for the stuff that needs a lot of delta V, both to accelerate and to decelerate. And of course, the ion engines are there for like small adjustments, station keeping. In the past, I think all they had were hypergolic
it has a computer predicting if the spacecraft is
like
getting
for like
sick.
communication satellites.
We're also testing radiometric tracking, which, by the way, helps in navigation by using radio waves to track the spacecraft's position and velocity. So basically, radiometric tracking uses radio frequencies to track where the vehicle is and where it's going.
So Blue Ring is going to be very busy during this mission. It'll be sending and receiving data. It'll be tracking its own location and processing mission data real time. And all of this will be communicated over RF to Atlas antennas stationed in Hawaii, the state of Georgia, and even Australia.
Yeah, these ground stations will collect telemetry and radiometric data, which is crucial for understanding how the spacecraft is performing and navigating in highly elliptical orbits in the MEO range. Now, this is unique because it allows the spacecraft to spend a significant amount of time over specific areas of Earth, making it an ideal orbit for certain communication and observation missions. And this is all part of proving how Blue Ring can
I wonder if
navigate.
that's anything like the Molniya
all
orbit,
the data
where
collected from
that
this
is a very
mission
highly
will be used to
elliptic
support
orbit.
the
And
future production of the Blue Ring
in the
space
past, the
vehicle,
Soviets
which
had to put
undoubtedly
a
will
lot of
play
these
a
things
vital role
into high.
in further space exploration and communication
Basically, when it goes into the North Hemisphere
That data
and
experience
high
gained
lines
from
of
this
latitude,
Pathfinder mission will be invaluable
that's when they put it for the farthest and where it's moving the slowest. And then as another one comes into view, the other one's starting to go over the horizon and then make a very close perigee back to the
there you
planet.
have it, folks. Now,
on the other way.
Blue Ring Pathfinder is supported by the Department of Defense's Innovation Unit, or DIU. And let me tell you, we're so thankful for their involvement today. I should say they have been so supportive of our Pathfinder, but just the Blue Ring program in general. They are believers like us, so thank you to them. All right, with that, we're at T-minus 24 minutes and 3 seconds to go until T-minus 0. This is NG-1, the first
And of
flight
course,
of
this
New Glenn,
assumes
and
that they're
we're
not
so
adding any more
glad you're here
time.
joining us this evening. Why don't we take a moment to talk about our mission objectives for the launch? This is our first flight, and we've prepared rigorously.
Like I
for
said,
it.
getting it
But
off the
we
ground is
also know
important.
that
Then the
none
next one
of
is
this
max
is
Q.
easy.
The next one is
And our
MECO
key
and
objective today is
separation
to
of the
reach
stages and
orbit
ignition of the
safely.
second stage engines.
Anything
And then from
beyond
there,
that is icing on
getting
the
that to
cake.
orbit,
Bonus points.
of course, is the primary
we know
one.
that landing the booster on the first try offshore is ambitious, but we are going for it. No matter what happens today, we are going
Wow,
to
it looks like
learn,
there's a lot of
refine,
frost
and
on the first
apply
stage.
that knowledge to our next launch. We're really looking forward to seeing how the vehicle performs. As I said earlier, more data, the better, right? We've pushed every single part, component, system in our testing well beyond its limits by design.
T-minus 23 minutes and counting.
But we also recognize that no amount of ground testing or mission simulations can replace the real-world conditions of flying the
Yep,
system
you gotta fly
into space, which is why we can't wait for the mission to get underway, see how things perform, and apply all the lessons learned to our next launch and beyond. It is an absolutely thrilling day. Again, we're so glad that you're here to share it with us. Now with that, we're at T-minus 22 minutes and 30 seconds to go until launch. Why don't we take a moment and check out New Glenn on the pad as it gets ready for its first launch to space today.
So basically, it is essentially I think what it strikes me as, apart from the reusability portion of it, although I think ULA is in the process of evaluating options for reusability, although they're probably just going to reuse the engine and its supporting superstructure there. I remember seeing pictures of what they do is that they would flip it around, and there's a sort of something that works like a parachute, a combination of heat shield and parachute to bring it down, whereas the tank ends up getting burned up as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. Well, we'll see how the first stage goes on this one, because if they can pull this off, this will only be the second, at least American, orbital class vehicle that can be reused after a touchdown on a surface such as a drone ship, a barge, or a landing pad back near where it launched. So, a lot of firsts are going to be lined up for this particular launch. We'll see what happens. We're looking forward to it. This is getting really exciting.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We are at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds to go until New Glenn's first launch. What a day for us. And, you know, it takes many, many smart people to bring a vehicle like New Glenn together. And one of those great people that I've had the pleasure of working with over several years is someone who now leads up customer integration for New Glenn. That is Blue Origin's Laura McGinnis. Laura is the Vice President of Mission Management for New Glenn. Now, before Blue, Laura spent time in a similar role with United Launch Alliance. She also had quite the career at the Air Force. And I had the pleasure of chatting with her just for a few minutes, just a little bit earlier, to hear what customers can start to expect from a vehicle like New Glenn. Let's listen to that chat.
Laura, thank you for taking the time, especially on such an important day,
T-minus 20 minutes
give us
and
a tour
counting.
of the factory. This is kind of like your second home, I imagine, for the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely, Ariana. We're so excited about this factory and super excited to show you all a little bit about it.
Well, so talk to me a little bit about what we got going on here. We've got multiple rockets coming down the line.
Yeah, all kinds of things going on. So the basic layout is that the raw materials comes in from the south side of the building down here at the end of the aisle. We weld the tanks together down there. Then we bring the completed modules here for assembly. Over here we have our GS1 aft module, which will have landing legs, 7 BE4 engines installed. We do all of that work. We continue to assemble the stages down here. We build fairings behind the wall over here, our 7-meter fairing, which our customers love. And eventually we roll out the Glenn Stage 1, Glenn Stage 2, and the fairings out of the north end of the building. Those are all transported 8 miles over to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and are assembled in our integration facility over there prior to launch.
And that's also, of course, where we integrate the payload as well. Just talking about customers a little bit.
Nope, looks like they've updated the time again.
Been saying about what they're excited about.
We're working with our national security customer right now on certifying New Glenn because they really need an additional launch system.
Right.
We're also working with our NASA customers. They've got a lot of interest in the size of our payload fairing, both for rideshare
space,
kinds of things,
a little background, but for that particular one,
commercial customers are thrilled about our capability
space
of
defense for the defense loads is that there's a law that went into effect that basically said no payload with national security interests or
so these
or any kind of application should be flown on anything with foreign power, most notably the Atlas V. And that, I believe that law came into effect shortly after Russia annexed Crimea. And shortly after that, United Launch Alliance stopped purchasing the RD-180. And of course, once Russia outright invaded Ukraine, then, at the time when he was still head of Roscosmos,
I would say one of our best learning opportunities was
Dmitry Rogozin basically told,
it was awesome.
basically told the folks over at ULA, you're not getting any tech support for what you have left, and basically told basically told the
What
folks
are you
over at
most looking
SpaceX,
forward to?
well, you can go and
When it
ride
is
your
go
you
time,
can get up
when
there
the
by
rocket lifts off, what do you think that's going to
broomstick
feel like?
or whatever
I mean,
have
I
you,
will
whatever have
say
you. And then of course,
I love
shortly
that
after
final
that,
4 minutes
and
when we pick up terminal count,
during the launch
we're
of one of
counting down,
the
and
Starlink
the
missions,
room is
they
super quiet,
famously
the
said,
energy, the
"Time to
excitement,
let
the
the
moment,
broomstick
and then
let the
feeling that
broomstick
liftoff,
rise and hear the
seeing
sounds of
it
freedom."
seeing it on its way over the horizon,
LD
and
is
then
go for
hearing that
launch.
final call out that we have inserted our
And it's
payload
actually one of my
customer
sound
unsuccessfully into orbit is like
alerts.
just-
I don't know.
just
I'm
an
not sure if it
amazing
works,
moment,
but
and
we're
I
gonna
can't wait
try
for
it
it. I
right
know
now,
New Glen's gonna do it. It's gonna be a great day.
just for grins and giggles. Stand by.
A big thank you to Laura again for joining for that quick tour through our factory.
Well,
right
I opened the
behind
wrong
where we are
tab.
this evening.
Here it is. I think. There we go.
Time to let the American broomstick fly and hear the sounds of freedom.
I don't know if it's going
LG
to
is
play.
go for launch.
There it is.
Okay, we are at T-minus 31 minutes and 6 seconds to go until NG-1. We continue to tick down towards our first launch. I will mention again, you may have seen we went down and then we added some more time to the clock. That is just fine. That is our team taking a couple more minutes to make sure that all of their procedures are aligned as we tick down towards T-minus 0.
Yeah, well, depending on how much time they end up adding, I may end up ending the stream. We'll see how things look closer we get to, say,
what is
midnight.
that going to look like as we see this vehicle fly today?
I don't know how far
we've
the window
imagined
is.
New Glen's flight for so long. We've looked forward to this day, and I'm so excited just to see another vehicle of this size flying from the coast of Florida. We're going to be feeling the power of those BE-4 engines here in the studio very shortly. After liftoff,
I just now noticed the stream froze, and I had to reload. Oh,
that we'll be tracking.
I've been watching the whole. I've been
go
watching
ahead
it
and
at
take
times,
a
and
detailed
everything
look
seems
at
to be
what
okay
New
that I
Glen's
can tell. It
first
says
flight is
it's a
going to
2-hour
be.
window. Okay, so it started at 10 p.m. my time, and will end at midnight hours, and end at midnight my time.
7 BE-4 engines will ignite and propel the rocket upward with over 3.8 million pounds of thrust, or roughly 17,000 kilonewtons. The vehicle will quickly reach supersonic speeds as it climbs through the atmosphere. As the rocket ascends, it will encounter maximum aerodynamic pressure known as max Q at around 40,000 feet or 12 kilometers. This is the point at which the stress on the vehicle is at its highest. Around 3 minutes into the flight, the vehicle will turn off its engines, marking the end of the boost phase. Shortly after, the reusable first stage will separate and begin its journey back to Earth. 2 BE-3U engines on the second stage will ignite and propel it onward into orbit with the payload. The reusable booster reorients in the vacuum of space using its reaction control system. At 220,000 feet or 67 kilometers, it executes an exo-atmospheric deceleration burn using its Center 3 engines. These engines gimbal for maximum control of the booster. This burn slows the
1,
vehicle
7, and
down
3, I would
before
assume.
re-entering the atmosphere. As it descends, the booster's strakes and fins work together to slow it down and guide it autonomously back to Earth, landing on a vessel at sea. At around 9,000 feet, or just under 3,000 meters, the first stage begins its final landing burn. The 3 middle engines will light for 20 seconds, slowing the vehicle in preparation for the final descent. The 2 outer engines will turn off, and the center engine will execute the final controlled maneuver onto the landing platform.
Using 8 legs as opposed to 4.
The vessel will return to Cape Canaveral to prepare for its next mission.
Or rather 6, possibly.
Meanwhile, in
yeah,
space,
6 of them.
the second stage will continue to power the payload towards its final orbit. At around 400,000 feet or 120 kilometers, the payload fairings will jettison. New Glenn will deliver an unprecedented range of payloads. Large satellites, dual payloads, orbital vehicles, large constellation dispensers, even moonlanders destined to establish permanent human presence on the moon. This is New Glenn. This is how we will build a road to space.
That thing is just gargantuan. I'm not saying that. I mean, of course, we know that
So again, there you got an opportunity
Starship
to
Super
see
Heavy are much bigger.
what the mission profile will be for this rocket this evening. But I think what was really cool about that video as well is it gives you a sense of the future as well in terms of the various vehicles that we're going to be able to take on this rocket, whether it's a lot of LEO satellites or a lunar lander or a massive GEO payload, whatever it may be. I think that's one of the coolest things about this vehicle. It is very versatile, and it's the power of the vehicle matched with the volume.
Sorry,
of
I actually had myself
fairing
muted.
that's
I was
going
reading
to
your
allow
message
this vehicle
just
to
now,
be a
KF16.
workhorse for Blue Origin as well
If I
as
remember
our
right, there's
customers
something
for
about
years to
these
come. So,
landing legs that hopefully
beautiful rocket
simplify
on the pad
refurbishment
there
needs
waiting. Its
as
first
compared
launch
to Falcon
to
9.
space.
I don't remember what though, but the way those things look like, those things look pretty solid as far as the way they deploy and the way they lock in place. Because the other ones for Falcon 9 look like they could collapse and have collapsed on multiple occasions. In fact, that is probably, I believe, how one of those landings managed to break a consecutive streak of an unbroken consecutive streak of landings on either at a landing zone or a drone ship. So basically this one, I mean, even though, and then of course the smaller version of that essentially, which is the, which would essentially be the Vulcan Centaur, that uses 2 BE-4s that will put up smaller payloads. This one looks like it's due to be a heavy lift vehicle. And of course the Blue Ring looks to be an interesting setup because that's practically infrastructure in and of itself, not just an adapter to fly vehicles up there, like say the one of the upcoming transport missions, which goes into sun synchronous orbit every few months or so, and it'll actually act as additional thing. In fact, Agena is one of the first space bus vehicles that went up there. It wasn't just a second stage; it was actually a full bus. Well, Falcon 9 uses a crush suspension system when it will crush inwards to absorb shock. New Glenn's low Earth orbit payload is planned to be at 40 tons. I think Vulcan with 6 SRBs can do 28 or 29 tons. Oh yeah, okay. And although the SRBs, those are, I wonder how those compare to the gems that are put onto, say, Atlas 5, like for example with its 5-meter fairing. Because like the 551s, for example, the 551 configurations, for example. You know, those actually, you know what? One of those must be liquid hydrogen and one must be liquid methane. If you're looking at that, you're looking at those 2 poles down there, that wouldn't surprise me. And on top of that, there's another one in the distance. Wouldn't be surprised that that's hydrogen, that's actually hydrogen over there, because hydrogen in a regular oxygen, in a regular atmosphere condition, I believe burns red and burns almost clear, and when it gets closer to stoichiometric. So that's a good question. You mentioned it earlier, and I think we got our answer just by that picture. Because one of the things they have to do for boil off when it with the fuel, such as the case with LH2, with stuff like the Centaur, upper stage of New Glenn, and the entire vehicle, like when Delta IV Heavy was doing it. And of course, Space Shuttle and now SLS. So I had the idea that SpaceX could use a modified Falcon 9 second stage as the third stage payload deploy on the Starship. That's interesting. Because I know some vehicles have third and fourth stages, like for example the Molnia vehicle, which is another R7 derivative, uses 4 stages because it has a very, very, very high altitude. Starship Centaur 5 would be a possibility, would be possibly even more epic, aside from all the complications of figuring out how to feed hydrogen into there. Yeah, interesting, because I know one of the things they had to do with, say, for example, the first stage of Saturn V is that the oxidizer lines actually have in order to make a beeline to the engine, they actually had to put pipe plumbing right through the RP-1 tanks just so they can have a nice, straight, clean shot. Because the way these vehicles are built, RP-1's at the bottom and liquid oxygen's at the top. And another thing to note about RP-1 versus liquid methane and RP-1 are apparently very, 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 very similar in terms of density, which means you could theoretically use the same turbo pump and the same shaft to drive both pumps, which you can with RP-1 and liquid oxygen. I need to put Centaur on the shuttle. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that one. And I think after what happened with Challenger, that was not the problem with the Centaur on Challenger. That was a completely different issue entirely. That, of course, was the burn through of one of the O-rings, which had frozen and become very brittle. Infrastructure was even being built for it, but then Challenger happened. Yep. I was aware, yes, but it was a cool idea. Went into the gutter after the Challenger disaster, apparently. And so did SLC-6 over at Vandenberg, which is where the shuttle would have launched had it gone to either polar or retrograde orbits. That's because Vandenberg's in a better position for both of those types of launches. And on top of that, Scott Manley has a video that talks about one other flight profile they were looking at doing, which is also apparently one of the abort profiles, which is the AOA, or abort once around. After it finishes one orbit, it'll immediately leave the atmosphere and try and make a touchdown at one of the alternate landing sites, such as Zaragoza in Spain, various places in Morocco and elsewhere. Morone, Spain. ISC orbit once around and grabs a Soviet satellite mission. I remember that. I think Scott Manley has that exact particular one, and talked about that. And of course, that pretty much got the kibosh, because for one, that would have been an international incident and a half. There are the 7 BE-4s. I'm not sure if that's an actual real-time view of said engines, of this particular vehicle's engines. So yeah, if I had to guess, it would be 1, 3, and 7 are the engines that light for the entry burn, as well as for the first part of the landing burn. Did you know that Bermuda could have worked as a space shuttle alternate landing site? Possibly. I don't know. What is its line of latitude? I'm curious. It all depends on the flight profile, because like, for example, most of the stuff has a positive. They launch. When they start traveling eastward, they go north of the equator, and then of course they flip around on the other side of the. They go to the other side of the equator on the other side of the planet. Well, actually, they don't. During the first orbit, they actually go across going south rather than going north. North happens just before I think they come across the USA. At least on ISS missions anyway. But and then of course some of the other stuff went like a 28 degree, which is I believe what STS-107 used for its research mission. Yep, this is the furthest down we've seen it thus far. Bermuda is slightly north of Cape Canaveral, KSC, 32.3 degrees versus 28.5 degrees north. Okay, I see. Oh, okay. So Cape Canaveral and KSC are actually closer to the equator than Bermuda is. Ah, that's interesting. I think I might have remembered seeing something like that there, but various other sites were included, basically places in Italy, Ben Gurir, Morocco, but after various terrorist attacks happened in the earliest part of this century, they stopped using those, opting instead for sites in Spain, most notably Zaragoza and Morón, especially for ISS flights. But anyway, another thing about the AOA, the window for it apparently is absurdly short, happening between...
Welcome back, everybody. We're at T-minus 16 minutes and 45 seconds to go until launch here. An exciting evening for all of us here at Blue Origin. I'm so glad that you've joined us. Now, we have spoken about the wealth of experience in the New Glenn launch and mission control rooms upstairs, and I want to take it back to Maggie upstairs, who is standing by up there. Maggie, you with us?
Yep, Ariane, I am back at mission control, and as we make our way towards terminal count, the energy is high. It might seem like it's a little quiet with everyone sitting down, but the communications are ongoing. The launch director and his team are working super hard to get us there.
I love it. They're in the zone. So, Maggie, I'd love for you to talk us through some of the people behind the mission up there. Walk us through, who's on console.
Speaking of space shuttle modes and back to AOA, for example, it's only probably a few seconds worth of space between that and the press to ATO call. And press to ATO call, that's after that point they can use the ATO abort mode, which had to be used with STS-51F mission, which happened when the number 2 engine failed.
The go, no go, and making sure that we get our best chance of success. Ben actually comes from
everywhere and nowhere military family. I know that feeling, although I didn't move that much, believe it or not.
Into New Glenn. Now, Ben and I go way back. We worked on New Shepard together for quite a while, and I've had a chance to talk to him quite a bit this week. And I was asking him what his pre-launch traditions are and what he's bringing here to New Glen. And
I believe terminal count starts at T-minus 4 minutes.
3 alarms
We're inside of T-minus 15 minutes, the closest we've been to lift off yet.
Use all 3 of them today, but I'll ask him afterwards. And then he also sets little post-it notes on the screens of his console mates so that they get a little funny note or a little encouraging thing from their launch director before they go. And then when we do terminal count, he will be doing his fist bumps with the entire team.
I love it. I know Ben is going to crush it. Why don't you give us some other highlights? Who else is supporting Ben with launch control today?
Ben is supported by a really large team, and we're not going to have time to touch on them all, but a couple here. First, we have Ann Dickey. Ann is the assistant flight director, and shout out to New Shepard again. Ann comes from that program as well.
T-minus 4 minutes.
Ann has been working the integrated schedule
and counting
all week long, really making sure that this team is ready to go. And after we launch successfully, she is going to get herself an ice cream cone, and I will be joining her. Next,
that does sound good.
Martin De La Torre. Martin is a ground controller, which means that he will be working through all of the data and controls of our ground system out there.
Our attention to terrestrial matters would be to limit the human spirit. Yep, that's what I would say to anybody who thinks we should take care of matters on the ground first and only.
Martin has a
no,
tough job
I'm sorry. We need to look up to the stars.
His favorite quote is from Stephen Hawking, and so he's got heroes, I think, like the rest of us.
There's an EKSB series with someone
Next we have
using
Stephen
Kerbal
Shelley.
operating system
now,
to demonstrate
again, you
various
talked about the Jacqueline a
shuttle
little bit
abort
earlier. That's our offshore
methods such
vessel,
as
and Stephen Shelley is our offshore
even a
recovery
hypothetical
lead.
Vandenberg RTLS.
So as we go through this whole
Interesting.
process, the team and the launch director, Ben, are constantly checking in with Stephen to make sure that we know that the barge is ready should we be able to land New Glenn. His launch day ritual is actually the same as Ben, another 3-alarm guy. So we'll be asking him.
So we got a 3-alarm fire basically to start his day. Oh, that's gotta be fun.
We have Megan Lewis. Now, Megan is one of our 2 primary launch controllers, which means that she has control authority over a lot of these major systems on New Glenn.
Oh my
Megan
goodness.
is from Utah, and in a very sweet story,
Did my
Megan is
grandmother
actually wearing a
with
bracelet
charms
today
for
that
each
her
Apollo
grandfather
mission he
gave
worked.
her
Oh wow, that's
grandmother
pretty
with
cool.
charms for every Apollo mission that he worked. So a really incredible legacy of spaceflight in that family, and they're bringing it to the Blue family. So just we're really proud of them today. Megan Lewis and team, led by Ben Dykstra, are getting it done.
I love it. Just some wonderful stories, and each one of them has their
T-minus
their
12 minutes and
ritual.
counting.
I'm glad that it seems like their alarm system has worked, because yes, they are all on console and ready to rock and roll today. That's a good thing. So, hey, Maggie, stay plugged in up there for us, and we will keep checking back in with you. All right, everybody, we're at T-minus 11 minutes and 40 seconds to
I wonder
go
when they're going to do a
until
final
launch. Why don't we
poll
take
for
a moment
readiness.
here and send it over to the pad and check in on New Glenn as it gets ready for its first launch to space today.
Okay, so yeah, that's fingers crossed we make it. Yep, everything's been looking good so far, despite the fact that they've had to extend out the T0 a couple of times already during the course of this. And hopefully we won't scrub, but at the same time, better to scrub than an expensive boom. T-minus 11 minutes and counting. Turnaround time is 2 days. That sounds about right, because tomorrow, the limiting factor is weather. Like KF16 and I were saying, it has a 60% chance of violation. I'd have to go look at what the actual constraints are. I should still have that document up from Patrick's 45th. Let's see. The issues are cumulus cloud rule, thick cloud layers, and liftoff winds. Yeah, you don't want to. One of the things that I've heard talked about during that is that if there's wind shear during the course of the ascent, that could actually damage any spacecraft going through that area where wind shear rather happens to happen. And as a matter of fact, wind shear was how they figured out what happened to Challenger. Recovery area weather will apparently be decent with just 24-hour delay. It's just the weather in the launch area that could be the issue. Yeah, in under 10 minutes. We're inside of 10 minutes. Getting closer to startup. At T-minus 4 minutes, they will go and start terminal count. Basically, transferring power from ground-based supplies to supplies aboard the spacecraft. Yep. Looking forward to it myself. Oh, they just added another 30 minutes. 20 minutes, actually. Yep, not again. Not sure if Space Force weather report includes sea state issues, which is where the cause of the recent delays, though. That is true. That is absolutely true. They because I remember reading the various stuff on things on Twitter. They were talking about how the Atlantic was getting a bit too choppy for their personal for their liking. They said it's only a couple of feet. It makes me wonder if they're going to do a rofi under there at all. But they're talking about where the water table is once the whole plane trench is filled. But yeah, I think they do. T-minus 28 minutes and counting. Again. So, Like I was saying earlier, this uses the term I was actually looking for is it's a closed cycle stage combustion closed cycle oxidizer rich cycle, basically where they put all of the oxidizer and a little bit of fuel into the turbo pump and sending the rest into the engine.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We're at T-minus 27 minutes and 5 seconds to go until launch. You may have noticed that we've added some more time to the clock. As we mentioned before, this is just our teams getting aligned, making sure that each of the separate sub-teams have all gone through all of their checklists, make sure that everything is in the green, making sure that the weather here at the Cape and downrange, everything is within bounds. So again, if we need to add a couple more minutes, that is quite all right with us. But while we've got a little bit more time, I would like to check in with my colleague Eddie.
Got about an hour left in the window.
He's joined by
also an hour left in my window. I need to start considering getting to bed
what you got going
shortly
on
after
down
midnight
there?
because
hey, Ariane,
I had to be up at about quarter after 4 in the morning.
The house here at Cars Park. I'm with the Smith family. We're working at Blue Origin, and working on rockets is a family affair. I'm with Father Mike Smith, son Corbin Smith, and granddaughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth, tell me, you've sent a postcard to space, is that right?
Yes.
And tell me, what was on your postcard?
There was rockets and planets.
Rockets and planets on the postcard. Now, Corbin, how did you get your start at Blue Origin?
So I first started up in Huntsville, where I worked with an amazing team on the engine crew, building BE4 and BE3U. Now I'm here down at Rocket Park, building the thrust structures for GS2.
Excellent. Must be special to be working on that GS2 rocket out there. And Mike, how about you? How did you get your start at Blue?
Well, it was my son that actually encouraged me to apply, and we got hired around the same time. And it's been awesome being able to work with him on different projects. We get to talk about work at home and do different things. We bleed blue at home.
Excellent, excellent. And Elizabeth, tell me, what are you most looking forward to today's launch?
For the rocket to go up in space.
Well,
that seems simple enough.
End on that note, Ariane, we're looking forward for that rocket to
25
go to
minutes
space.
and counting.
Let's send New Glenn to space. Let's light this candle.
I love it. It is a family affair, and I think I love seeing the different generations there, father, son, pair working at Blue.
And Holy Ghost now.
I look forward to seeing that little firecracker, that little girl joining us in a couple of years here in the future. It just speaks to, you know, it takes years to build these rockets, and that's what we're here to do at Blue. We're here to build these rockets that are
and of course
laying
make
the
sure they actually
foundation
work
for the building the road to space, right? And so that children like her can pick up the torch and build on top of that. We're setting forth so that they can build infrastructure in space, and really, it's all for the benefit of Earth. Well, with that, thanks, Eddie, for checking in with us. We are at T-minus 24 minutes and 10 seconds to go until launch. Let's check out New Glenn on the pad as it gets ready for launch this evening.
and we got T-minus 24 minutes and counting. And I think one of the things I've noticed with those is that there's actually a network of wires on some of these sites where, especially if it happens to have 4 towers around it, they'll have wires that that basically is something of a largish needle that these rockets thread. And I think the reason for that is to be essentially, and of course those rods up top are lightning rods, or at least can function, has one of the functions of being lightning rods. T-minus 23 minutes and counting. Of course, they can vent liquid oxygen at the pad. LCH4 and LH2, they cannot and have to go move it out there and burn it off. And with this, the space shuttle, they'd have the beanie cap, which apparently handles both LH2 and LO2. and they can vent LO2 on site, whereas with LH2 they have to send it out somewhere else and burn it off into the atmosphere. But yeah, going back to the RTLS thing that they were saying earlier, I don't know if you ever saw the video that's up there. There are a couple of different videos. One is just an audio of it with against a real launch, and another one is on a simulated launch, which shows what they would have seen out the vehicle had that been an actual launch, where basically RTLS was called when one of the engines shuts down prematurely, and then shortly after that, all the others shut down as well, and that happens after they jettison the two SRBs and actually have the vehicle pointed the other way, headed towards the Cape. They lost so many engines and so much ability to nullify the thrust. They actually had to flip the vehicle back all the way and then basically go like a re-entry. The only thing is they'd have to figure out how to ditch. And ditching wasn't necessarily an option. It was likely unsurvivable, but at least they stood a decent chance of doing that after Challenger. And Challenger also informed the formation of several different additional new abort modes, which would have made things a lot more survivable had those modes been needed. And there's one of the umbilicals that'll come off almost immediately after launch. And that's probably one of the things that also do is if that transporter erector, if it actually moves, is that will pull off the. And I imagine there'll also be some quick disconnects in there too that will automatically undo themselves. They'll just what happens is that there'll be clamps in there that get electrically disconnected. That'll electrically cause that particular fitting to be disconnected during the course of liftoff.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining
We're
us.
inside of 20 minutes and counting.
19 minutes and 55 seconds to go until launch. New Glenn looking good there on the pad. We saw some beautiful views, as Denise has talked about. All the propellants are nice and chilled down. You saw the big, beautiful Blue Origin word mark and feather on that rocket. She is looking beautiful. But we do have a little bit more time here. Why don't we take a moment to talk about the BE4 engines? We're looking at the vehicle right now. At the base of the vehicle, oh, that's a pretty shot right there. You see the 7 nozzles of the 7 BE4 engines. You want to tell us a little bit more, Denise?
Yeah, so New Glenn is powered by 7 BE4 engines. Now, these are the nation's first reusable, oxidizer-rich stage combustion booster engines. They use liquid oxygen and liquefied natural gas, or LNG,
Thermal
which
camera
is
view, yeah, very
essentially a
possibly.
commercial form of methane.
Yeah, and we selected LNG because it's cleaner burning and more efficient than kerosene, or also known as RP1, rocket propellant 1. That's what a lot of rockets use. It's also low cost and widely available, which is really important when you're doing lots of launches, which is our intention for this New Glenn program. I should also note that we have done a ton of testing on the BE4 engine, and we also want to keep those costs down as well. All of it adds up, right? And one of the coolest aspects, though, about LNG is that it can self-pressurize its tank through a process known as autogenous repressurization, right? So this eliminates the need for costly and complex systems that use helium, which is pretty rare. So normally you got helium.
Yeah, you got to be able to apply back pressure in order to keep the tanks from collapsing from within as the
engines to get them ready to go.
fuel depletes.
But with LNG, it basically does it on its own. That's what that means.
It's so fascinating. And, you know, in terms of power, each BE4 engine generates an impressive 550,000 pounds of thrust. So when
First
you combine
oxygen-rich
all
stage
7
combustion engine.
New
If
Glenn
only
produces
Aerojet Rocketdyne made the AR-1, but I guess there was no
million
demand
pounds of
for it.
thrust
If
at
ULA
launch.
doesn't want it,
And just to put that
and
into
making engines
perspective,
and making
roughly
engines
half the
in-house
thrust of a Saturn V
is
rocket,
the big
which
thing
took
for
humans to the
everyone
moon.
else. Yeah.
Imagine that power of 200 Boeing 737 airplane engines all firing at once. That's what we're looking at here.
And that is a ton of power. You see that these images here, this video.
That
this
beautiful
is from
blue
our
flame.
test
Look
facility
at that.
down in West Texas. And man, oh man, I have been down there actually for one of these tests. And our facility down in West Texas is in this valley. And it just reverberates. You feel like you're in the inside of a drum. It just shakes the entire valley. And I mean, it's just incredible. And we're putting
About 17 minutes and counting.
Vehicle. The other thing you should see in that video there is that it burns this really cool blue color. So that's another. I'm not saying that's why we chose this propellant.
Interesting
but
effect
it's a nice
that
little bonus to it.
what
So
with
a
that
lot
dust
of
that
power
gets
coming
pulled
out
into the
of
exhaust.
out of these engines,
Ooh,
but then also
what was that, I wonder?
a lot of interesting technology that's gone into the turbo pumps too. Do you want to talk about that a little
Gets
bit?
pulled
They
into the
sure are. So the turbo pumps, which pump fuel and oxygen, are also incredibly powerful. Together, they produce the equivalent amount of horsepower needed to power 2 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers at full speed. Yet each turbo pump is small enough to fit in the back seat of your car.
Think
Wow.
about that. I mean, the comparison is crazy, but just think about that efficiency that goes into that.
Oh, that's a
turbo
single pump
machinery.
shaft. Oh, okay,
And
it
you
is.
also see
Yes.
Here, obviously, the comparison between our BE4 engine. So there are 7 of those on the base of the vehicle, and our BE3U, BE3.
So it does use a single pump shaft.
On the second
So it
stage.
uses a single pump shaft to pump both LCH4 and
talk a
LO2.
little bit more here. You see the comparison of the BE4 to the BE3U. You also have a comparison of the power of it as well. You know, both of these engines are highly sophisticated and have unique functionality built for New Glenn itself. So for BE4, as we noted, we've got 7 of these engines in total at the booster. We saw a cool image of that a second ago. The 3 middle engines are gimbaling engines that can pivot to help steer the rocket. So that will be working, of course, in conjunction with the fins at the top of the booster. Now, those 3 middle engines are going to relight to help with deceleration and
T-minus
landing
15
burns.
minutes and counting.
And the other 4 engines are fixed. And this is the combination that gives us both the power that we need, but also the
Did you ever hear of
flexibility
Rocketdyne
we need for different stages of flight.
Tri-propellant?
And you know
Yeah, I
the
think I have
BE4
heard of it. I
engines
forget
are
what the
produced
actual
at our
propellants are.
manufacturing facility
I think
in
you've mentioned it
Huntsville,
once before
Alabama,
yourself.
And they're tested rigorously at our facilities.
I forget
both in
which
West Texas and Huntsville to ensure they meet
materials
the
they
high
use for the
standards.
propellant.
Yeah, and we should note there are 7 of these on New Glenn, but our friends at ULA with
one
their
of its
Vulcan
components
rocket,
was
they use
molten
2 of these
lithium.
engines.
I
So,
remember
and
that.
those have
Oh
already
yeah, you
flown
know what? I think I
successfully to space.
remember reading
So
about
we
that
are
or
very
watching it.
proud
Also,
of
and also
that.
fluorine.
These engines have already flown to
Nasty
space, and
shit.
Can't wait to see them power this.
Fluorine you gotta be careful
this
with,
New
especially in the
Glenn
presence of
rocket
hydrogen.
as well. They are going to be rattling.
And
this
liquid hydrogen.
building
Yep,
very,
I remember
very
this
shortly.
now. I remember this
Well, with
now,
that, at
and
T-minus
it's
35
nasty
minutes
stuff.
to go until
A
launch.
liquid metal
Let's toss
fuel.
it
Oh,
back
not
to the
another
rocket and
one.
Check out New Glenn as this vehicle gets ready for its launch to space this evening.
Yeah, that's. Let's see. LH2, LF2, and LI. That's nasty stuff. Fluorine will oxidize oxygen itself. Yeah. All the halogens are really, really, really potent oxidizers, yes. And of course, lithium itself is a pretty nasty reducing agent. However, the BE3U has a specific impulse of only about 445 seconds, according to the Everyday Astronaut video. Yeah, and I think the RL10 and the RS25 have that beat. I think the RL10 is in the 500 range, isn't it? Because the RL10 uses the gas expander cycle, which doesn't burn any fuel until it hits the engine. And of course, the BE3U uses the tap-off cycle, which uses the actual exhaust from the engine, a little bit of the exhaust from the engine to drive the turbopump. That's comparable to Japan's LE5B series engines, which have a fairly low 30 bar chamber pressure. I'm surprised they didn't go for the higher chamber pressure. And I believe Raptor 3's is well in excess of 350 bar, if memory serves. I know that they were shooting for 300 bar with like Raptor or Raptor 2, and that was Elon's goal at the time. And of course, I think they've long since exceeded that now. 30 bar just seems pretty paltry compared to that. But then again, 30 bar may not necessarily be needed if it's on an upper stage engine. At that point, you just need efficiency more than you need thrust, and that's where the RL10 shines. You cannot burn the RL10 at sea level and getting anything meaningful out of it. It just won't work. I think same. And even though the J2, which were one of the upper stage engines for Apollo, or rather Saturn V, those two cannot be operated at sea level. They have to be operated in a vacuum, mainly because of the expansion ratio of the nozzle. Long nozzle RL10 on the Delta IV gets about 465.5 seconds specific impulse. The funny thing is that a prototype expander bleed engine from the 1990s got 487 to 467, 468 seconds by using a chamber pressure of 92 bar. Yeah. So it's a little higher than that other engine. But yeah, like I said, you're not going to get... I mean, the only LH2 engines that I've seen that do decently well for launching an engine, launching a spacecraft off the ground would be the RS-68A, which of course was what powered the Delta IV and the Delta IV Heavy engine, Delta IV Heavy rockets. Actually, no, the sea-level RL-10 not just was designed; it was flown on the DCX test vehicle. I seem to remember hearing about the DCX test vehicle. Is that the single stage to orbit engine, single stage to orbit spacecraft, or at least a prototype thereof? I had no idea they made a sea-level RL-10. Oh my, yes, I was right. And if memory serves, that was either Douglas or McDonnell Douglas that worked on that one. A lot of things happened between those two companies during the early parts of the space program. Like McDonnell, before it merged with McDonnell Douglas, was the one that created the Mercury capsule. So it's strange that the BE3U didn't go for higher chamber pressure and specific impulse. Maybe something with a much larger scale than the BE3U compared to the LE5B or the RL10 had something to do with... Oh, okay. LE5B, I don't remember what that one is. It crashed and the funding was pulled via... what a tragedy. Yep, it is. If only we spent a little more on space and a little less on war. Yeah, unfortunately... There are some people who think that we need to have wars going on, especially considering they want to. I don't want to go too deeply into that, but the point is, there are certain people you can't convince of that. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, sadly. But yeah, it was the RL10A5. Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if this thing's ever going to fly tonight, or it's going to be so late into the launch window that it's like, oh my god, I can't believe it. It does like a few minutes before the end of the launch window, before the launch window closes. LE5B. Oh, I see. LE-5B engines are the ones used on the upper stages of Japan's H-2A and H-3 rockets. Also previously on the H-2B. Sea level specific impulse for it was 360. That's not too shabby. That's for the RL-10A5, right? Because that's not bad for a liquid hydrogen engine. But the thing is, you probably need a lot of those in order to actually get a vehicle off the ground. And then what about the expansion ratio? Because single stage to orbit is tough to do with a fixed expansion ratio engine. That rocket had a TWR of 1.37. Okay. And if memory serves, using seconds to indicate specific impulse means this is how long you need to burn an engine to get a mass of about a certain amount of mass to a certain speed. 4 engines on it. Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of it. It was flat, if memory serves. Flat and sort of Dorito shaped. 4 engines on one side of it. Chamber pressure 39.12 bar. Area ratio 4. And I suspect Raptor was the same. Uses the same chamber pressure, both at sea level and in a vacuum. But of course, they have to change the expansion ratio once you hit a vacuum. Aerospike, of course, as we've seen before, would pretty much obviate the need for an engine bell because basically it's essentially a rocket engine turned inside out. Because the spike would essentially be what the bell would be. Speaking of aerospikes, yes, we were. We were indeed. Albeit obliquely. I never understood that definition of specific impulse. I just remember that as an exhaust velocity divided by 9.81 meters per second squared. And I know there's another one. There's another unit that can be used to define specific impulse. I just don't remember the exact parameters.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We are at T-minus 25 minutes and 40 seconds to go until launch. You may have seen we've been adding some time to the clock. This is to allow our teams to go through their checklists. Keep in mind there are multiple sub-teams that are up there in launch and mission control. We want to make sure that everything is ready to go, and if some of those items on the checklist take a little bit of extra time, we're going to do so. Especially since it is NG-1. We want to make sure that everybody is prepared and everything is aligned. We should also mention, again, we have to keep our eyes on the weather.
J2T was a proposed aerospike version of the J2 rocket. I think I remember hearing about that.
Continue to check out New Glenn
and also the J2S was a sea-level J2 engine. Oh, probably using a different expansion ratio nozzle, if I had to guess. So yeah, that's a lot of interesting stuff there, because I know the J2 engine was like on the second and third stages of Saturn V, and then something else was on stage 4, which of course was above the stage that held the LEM, or Lunar Excursion Module. The J2T would have had a specific impulse of 425 seconds. Oh my goodness, that's That's actually pretty good for a sea level engine, especially considering that even though I mean you have the Merlin 1D, it actually apparently is one of the best using complex hydrocarbons such as RP1.
Launch. With all this action going on
435 seconds. That's not too shabby.
Why don't we check in with our friend Maggie? Maggie, you got me?
Loud and clear, Ariane.
Right on. What are you? What's going on up there? What are you hearing about the status of our teams?
Yep, things are busy. The team is continuing to work through a few anomalies before we can proceed into terminal count. So we've got the engineers looking at all that data. We've got the controllers working through workarounds. So something that I think people don't always think about is that we have an enormous amount of what we're doing here in pre-launch procedures that's, scripted, we can plan it. But when off-nominal things are happening, we've got a team of controllers who can manually operate these systems. So the team that we talked about in our last bit, they are actually going through and able to turn things on and off, put different pressure through different valves. They are working through everything they can to make sure that we have a chance to launch today.
There's a proposed version with a larger spike with 441.
We run through, when you talk about all the preparation for a launch, of course, we talk about, testing the rocket itself, but we also go through a lot of these simulations in terms of the operations with our team, and you test as much as you can, you go through as many rehearsals as possible, but sometimes day of, you gotta put that's why we got the really smart people in there so that they can work through whatever it is they're finding that might be a little bit off, and that's what our team is doing up there. Maggie, what else? Sorry, go ahead.
No, the team here has gotten some good practice. I think we all saw
inside of 22
the
minutes.
hot fire that we recently successfully made it through. So that is, almost everything up until launch. Before that, we had a successful second stage hot fire. Those are those BE3U engines. And before that, we were doing tanking tests, mass simulators. We've done component testing, system testing. And a lot of the engineers that are working in this room are actually responsible engineers on the floor. So they've gotten their hands on this hardware. They know their systems.
Excellent. Very good point. I think I've always appreciated what we do here at Blue Origin. We tend to rotate our engineers. A lot of them, as you said, get to go down to the floor, see their hardware, maybe that they've designed,
and there was a beast that was
to the men and women that are fabricating, but then
M1,
also
which was bigger than the
assembling
F1.
the vehicle.
M1
they are very, very in tune, in touch with this vehicle. So
4.25
if there are things for them to work, especially in these last minutes,
4.25 probably in meters diameter for the sea level version.
Maggie, I want to thank you again for
not to be
bringing
confused
us
with
all
mass
the details.
flow rate.
We've got a couple of minutes to go here. We got 20 minutes and 47 seconds to go until launch. Why don't we take a look at New Glenn as this rocket gets ready to go to space.
Mention another way of defining a specific impulse, and I think I remember it now. Thrust divided by the weight. Weight flow rate. Okay. 4.25 meters. Okay. 4.25 meters. Okay. That would be quite big, and that was a Hydrolox engine, right? Goodness. T-minus 20 minutes and counting. 6.67 meganewtons of thrust. Yeah, I'd like to see what that is in pounds or tons of thrust, but I'd ask Siri, but she's kind of busy taking movement from me and my face and translating it to my VTuber model. $1.5 million. So that's a fraction of what this thing is putting out. And one thing to bear note is that when all the engines are lit on the ground with the space shuttle at liftoff, That's about 7 million pounds of thrust total.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We are T-minus
19 minutes and
to
counting.
go until launch here. And while our teams are continuing to get aligned, why don't we take a moment to chat a little bit about this amazing building we are in, the factory at Rocket Park here in Florida. This is where it all comes together, where we bend the metal on New Glenn. I literally see people down
One
there
hydrolox
bending
for
metal,
providing
pulling,
this in the 1960s.
putting the
Yeah.
components together, testing, cleaning. But also,
But of course, the question
not
is,
only do we
how do
talk
you move
about,
that much liquid
just all the
hydrogen through the
intricate
system
pieces and parts here,
because of its
but
as
to build a
its
rocket
quality
like this,
as
the sheer scale of the
being
facility here,
as Tim Dodd
this
put it,
factory, but
undense.
also the other buildings around here are just mind-blowing.
It really is
Because
quite
the
impressive.
size
So
of the
Rocket
propellant
Park
tank
is
inside the
essentially where we
EFT on the
bring
shuttle
a
and
rocket
likely
dream
on the
to
on
life.
the SLS
We're talking about
is very,
state-of-the-art
very, very,
manufacturing and
very
assembly
big,
areas
whereas the
designed
oxidizer
to
tank
produce
is
rockets
almost
efficiently
nothing.
and, of course, sustainably. This is where the stages of New Glenn come together.
Yeah, exactly. And the folks here at Rocket Park are not just building rockets, they're really shaping the future of space travel. You know, I should say, you know, I've had the good fortune of being here for 10 years now, and I have seen this facility, the whole park, in addition to Launch Complex 36, come together, and it is just amazing. Like, really from the bottom up, and the ability to build the next generation rocket in the next generation rocket factory. Like, our team is given what they need to make just an incredible vehicle. Why don't we take a deeper look at the home of New Glenn, Rocket Park?
Welcome to Blue Origin's Rocket Park in Florida, the home of New Glenn. This is where our orbital rocket is designed, built, integrated, launched, refurbished, and reflown, all within a 9-mile radius along Florida's Space Coast. Rocket Park is an active operations site for many Blue Origin activities, including manufacturing, integration, and testing for New Glenn, and production of our Blue Moon lunar landers and future programs. Florida's Space Coast is 72 miles long and steeped in more than 6 decades of human spaceflight history. We stand on the shoulders of giants. New Glenn will help
giants
us build
indeed.
a road to space for the benefit of Earth. It's the foundation of everything we will accomplish. It will deliver cargo and crew to anywhere, including the moon, and help us establish a permanent lunar presence. It will enable us to harness the resources of space and launch all kinds of infrastructure to make space accessible, usable, and affordable for humans. The factory on Merrow Island is the centerpiece of Rocket Park. It's here where New Glenn is built and tested. The high bay is where New Glenn becomes real. Raw material enters at one end, and completed rocket stages roll out the other side. From there, New Glenn heads to the surface coatings facility for its thermal protection, paint, and artwork. It then heads to tank cleaning and test, or TCAT.
It's disappointing how
for
Nixon
pressure
canned all
testing
space
and cleaning.
programs because he didn't want another space
The
program.
factory is also home to
Yeah,
New Glenn's mission control.
I don't know what to think about.
On
I mean,
launch
Nixon.
days, mission control comes
Nixon
alive
was.
as the rocket rolls
I have
out
very
from its
mixed
hangar
opinions
down the
about
road
Nixon.
and goes
But he
vertical
was not one of the
at
best.
Launch
He was not
Complex
certainly not
36.
one of the best presidents, and I don't want to go
This
too deeply
historic
into
launch
that.
site was rebuilt from the
I wonder
ground
how.
up just for New
Just
Glenn.
how many videos to this effect
Protected by 2
they
lightning
prepared
towers,
for this
almost double the
for the
height
stream.
of the Statue
Yeah,
of
I
Liberty.
can imagine.
New Glenn
We're inside of
prepares for
15
liftoff
minutes.
at mile marker
Hopefully,
0.
actually making it all the way down
This is where the
to
road to space
T0.
begins.
Mile 0, I like that. I wonder what kind of distance it is from there. Like
What
a quarter mile
beautiful
from
area
that to the
Rocket
launch
Park
pad.
is in. There's just so much history here on the Space Coast, and we are eager to write our own chapter with New Glenn.
Absolutely. There really is just so much history, and there's something to be said
Mile
about
zero,
the testing
kilometer
and
zero.
integration and design teams all working so closely together. I know that working
Well, I
on
guess
programs myself,
mile zero
being able
could
to
be
talk to the
the
designers
ground
and the people who are making
before
the
launch.
hardware is just so valuable to increase communication and efficiency, and our campus really allows for that.
100%. The physical proximity is really, really important, and it's not known actually, but historically rockets have launched out of the Cape, but they haven't been built here. And so
That's true. That is absolutely true. Because a lot of the stuff is some of the stuff was built in Mishout, Alabama, I believe. Either it's Alabama or Mississippi. I forget which it is. That's where they make the EFTs for the shuttle, and now the tanks for SLS.
To have that all come together, and I love that video because you see all the action, as I mentioned.
And a lot of the stuff that from the Apollo program
today, and I've got
had to come. Anything that came from the West Coast had to come through the Panama Canal or around the
pouring concrete.
Or the Cape of the very bottom of the South America, all the way up to the other side.
No joke, we had a poll when they were clearing the land for this rocket park as to how many turtles we would find, because we have to relocate all of the turtles because there's incredible wildlife in this area. So of course we wanted to make sure that we protect those animals and the wildlife.
I can imagine the environmental impact studies they had to do.
We had a poll as to how many turtles we were going to find. God, I wish I could remember.
I was going to say, do you
remember? I know. I didn't win it, clearly. But, there's just so much work that went into building this facility from the ground up. And to be here today is just, it feels surreal in many ways. And, that I was just talking a little bit about
coming up on 12 minutes.
Itself, but the launch complex, LC-36, as you touched on earlier this evening,
T-minus 12 minutes and counting.
For a long time has been where many historic rockets and missions have launched from, and we basically stripped
They have
it
another
down to
complex
ground
on in Vandenberg
and
set up.
rebuilt it.
I don't remember
for
the
this
name off
world-class
the actual designation off the
for
top of my head. Well,
decades
that
to
went.
come. We invested in.
Let's see what
this
happens. They may have scrubbed it.
knowing that we're going to be here a while. With that said, we also here at Blue Origin.
Oh,
like to
not
pay
another one.
homage to the giants of who have the shoulders upon which we stand, right? Like the vehicle, of course, is named New Glenn. But also, what's really cool is, and you can't quite see it here in the dark, but we kept what's called the blockhouse. So a lot of the previous during a lot of the previous launches, there would actually be a crew in the blockhouse, which is not very far from that launch pad, when they launched a rocket. This thing is like a concrete fort, basically. It's not very big, and it's got, on the inside, it's got these massive, heavy doors that close to protect the teams.
I can almost hear the commentators running out of things to say after all this time. I don't imagine they were expecting it to be
in our operations,
to be at all this
something that we have kept on
be at
site
it for this long. Yeah, I hear that.
The history that is in that facility. I hope that one day I'll be able to go back in there. I did get a chance to peek my head in a couple of years ago. It feels almost like what's the right way of putting it?
I wonder if that was ice that was coming off.
The past, the old computers and the ashtrays. They're literally cigarettes that are still there from back in the day. We don't allow that in our launch control rooms, but again, clearly a throwback to
feels
the
like they were
past.
talking to each other in
But
circles, stalling for time.
facility,
Yeah, I can certainly understand
really
that.
good to be here. It feels like.
But at this rate, I really need
set
to
up
go
for
to sleep now.
success as
Thanks
much
for the
as
stream, Kat,
possible, which
and
is
thank you
really,
so much
really
for the kind words. I appreciate it. I
we are at
really
T-
wish.
now 36 minutes and
Let's see
40
what they had to
seconds
say
go
here
until
about
launch.
this.
Again, our team has added more time to the clock. They are working through their checklist. There's clearly some things that they want to spend a little bit more time on, and that is okay. I will reiterate, we have spent years designing this rocket. We have spent months and months designing this mission building this,
I'm nocturnal,
this
so it'll
particular
be,
vehicle
here,
as
and
well.
I am probably not going to be up for much longer because I do need to go to bed at some point really soon.
If we need a couple more minutes, especially on this first launch, that is okay with us. You know, we want to give our team the right time and the space that they need to, you know, to work on whatever they got going on up there. I also want to, you know, keep in mind, my understanding is that the weather continues to stay inbounds here at the Cape, as well as out at sea. But for the moment, we've decided to put more time on the clock,
for it
which
because
means that
it ends at
we
3 a.m.
still
local
have
time. Yep.
a chance, still have
Probably
the
would have been better
opportunity
to cancel it
launch this evening
than perpetually kicking it in the than
I was waiting
perpetually
for
be
it.
kicking the can. I hear
It's
that.
pretty
And hi, Red Blue
because
Fire.
this vehicle
Thanks for coming
So
by.
you're telling me there's a chance.
That is the name of this booster. So yes, everything is it's like it was meant to be for this vehicle.
It really
Okay, with that, we are T-minus 35 minutes to go until launch. Let's continue to check out New Glenn on the pad as it continues to prepare for its launch to space this evening.
I've been lurking while studying. Every time I looked around, it was around T-minus 24 minutes. Yep, it's been that way several times throughout the course of this stream. This is getting a bit longer than I was anticipating, and I'm a little disappointed, I hate to say. But they were saying earlier they were talking about anomalies that they're working right now. I guess it all comes down to what they're willing to go ahead and work with, and what they're willing to fly with, as it were. Pun semi-intended. And what they're otherwise willing to, you know, deal with. But yeah, I wasn't anticipating this to go this long myself personally. But I'm gonna give it another, well, if more time gets added between now and well, we'll see how things go. If time gets added one more time, I am going to I'm gonna basically cut it. And if they run out of launch window, like I suspect they will, assuming they are going to close the window at 2 hours after the opening of the window, then I'm going to go ahead and call the stream. And then go to bed. T-minus 33 minutes and counting. Because, yeah, I need to get ready for work tomorrow. And basically the usual stuff. So, but yeah, apparently this will be, like they were saying, this is America's first oxidizer-rich staged combustion cycle engine. Russia's been doing it for decades in the form of the engines that power the Soyuz, as well as, of course, the engines that powered the Energia rocket. Some of that technology has made its way to other vehicles, such as the Atlas V in the form of the RD-180, by way of the RD-170, which power the Zenit boosters, which nowadays are used on their own, but you could have a few of them strapped to an Energia vehicle.
T-minus 31 minutes and 30 seconds to go until launch. As you may have noted, we continued to add time back to the clock. That, of course, is to make sure that our teams are aligned. I do understand that we're working an issue that is okay. That means, you know, if we're adding time to the clock, it means that the team thinks that there might be a possibility that we can sort it out so we can get to a launch this evening. So we're going to give them the time that they need. Beautiful launch of beautiful view of the vehicle on the pad there. From the outside, she sure looks ready to go, but of course, there's so much that goes into a complex vehicle like this. But since we do have some time, why don't we take a closer look at our vision and mission at Blue Origin? You know, as we've said time and time again, we're building a road to space for the benefit of Earth. This vision isn't only about exploring space, it's about making life better here on Earth. Let's check it out a bit more about our vision.
New Shepard is just the beginning.
The first step.
From the very start, it's only been about one thing: Earth.
Earth, our Blue Origin.
We've sent robotic probes all over the solar system, and it's full of wonders: gas giants, rocky moons.
Earth is the best planet. It is not close.
Despite the variety, despite the wonder in the solar system,
there's no place like home.
Hearing things to say. Yep, I don't disagree with that.
Place like it. All life on Earth are uniquely matched to this planet. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the solar system. Not even close, no way.
We have no choice but to preserve Earth.
Preserve this planet, this one.
we get to focus on the future, and the future is nothing without Earth.
For almost all of human history, Earth has seemed big.
It seemed big, but we now know it's small. It's finite.
Yep.
And we know that the rate that we're using Earth's resources is not sustainable.
Earth has
even
things that
Shatner
we need to
himself
work
said
on in the here and now.
But there are also long-term problems.
he saw it for himself.
We can't wait to work on the long-term problems. We have to work on both.
One fundamental long-term problem.
We will run out of energy on Earth.
It's just arithmetic. It's going to happen. Humans have always used about 100 watts of power. That's our natural metabolic rate.
But in our developed technological society, we use over 10,000 watts of power per person.
Humans' use of energy is not actually a bad thing.
We live in an era of dynamism and growth.
There are so many good things that happen when we use energy.
Think about technology, transportation, hospitals, data.
As humans, we are at our best when we are inventing, when we are growing, when we are making progress.
But humans are doubling our energy use every 25 years, and that's unsustainable. Today, you could cover all of humanity's energy needs by covering the state of Nevada in solar cells. But at that rate of growth, in 200 years, you'd have to cover the entire planet in solar cells.
What can we do? Can we be more efficient? Yes, but we have been.
Today's technology is more efficient in nearly every manner.
We are gaining efficiency, and yet, when we gain more efficiency, what do?
We use more energy.
We have an ever-increasing demand for more energy.
Yep.
So what if we just use less? Well, that doesn't work either. Throttling energy use means slowing down progress. You stop living in a world of abundance, and you move to a world of scarcity and rationing.
There has to be another way.
There is another way. Space.
I actually saw something they were talking about.
Space is full of abundant resources and energy. Space is vast and practically limitless. If we can learn to harness the power of space and the resources of space, we can tap the limitless resources to help preserve this planet.
We can go to space for what we need. We'll make it routine, safe, and cost-effective to get there.
We will build the rockets and the destinations for doing real work in space.
We can do even more than this. We can move the most polluting industries from Earth into space, where they can't hurt the Earth or the environment.
We can return Earth to a beautiful, natural state. It will be like a garden, like a national park, a place for education, for creativity, and for recreation. A place for enjoyment and for nature to thrive. In space, we can expand humanity.
We don't want to leave Earth behind, but preserve it and expand humanity into space.
We can have 1 trillion humans in the solar system, which means we'd have 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Einsteins. This would be an incredible civilization.
Humanity will grow and progress and use energy for good.
Humanity can expand into the solar system by building destinations close to Earth, close to our home planet.
New places, places we haven't even dreamed of yet.
Places that feel like home. Places where great work can be done using the resources of space. An expanse that is meant for everyone, all kinds of people.
To go with that one when they were talking about
This is a hopeful future. An enduring human presence in space. Space is the long-term solution for Earth.
We are building a critical part of the infrastructure that's going to allow others to unlock
the road to space so that future generations can unleash their creativity.
It won't be easy. Space must become much, much more accessible to make this vision a reality.
Big things start somewhere, and that somewhere happens to be today.
There are certain gates we have to go through, certain prerequisites. If we don't do these, we will never get there.
First, we have to radically lower the cost of access to space.
This means reusable rockets.
We have to get really good at using rockets over and over.
Reusable rockets, reusable engines.
Once you learn how to do that, you can basically start spinning this flywheel where the more you fly, the cheaper it gets. The cheaper it gets, the more you fly.
Launch, land, repeat.
Going back and landing a rocket is really hard. And it is absolutely essential that we get good at that so that we can drive down the cost of launch vehicles.
BE-3, BE-4, BE-7, all made from the ground up to be reusable propulsion systems.
Operational reusability.
Beautiful mock diamonds.
That means making space travel as routine as air travel is.
This is what will radically bring down the cost of getting to space.
24 minutes
and we
and
are
counting.
bringing all of that learning to New Glenn, the next step of building the road to space.
Once you have low-cost access to space, the next gate becomes harnessing the resources of the solar system.
There are so many more resources up there in space than there is on our planet.
I mean, everyone's familiar with this idea of locally sourced goods, and this is just a really extreme version of that.
The moon is where we'll learn to do all this.
The moon has a vast quantity of resources.
And if we can learn to harness those resources, we can travel without stressing the Earth.
That's the goal. We'll go to space, and we'll use its resources to power our transportation and build destinations.
Anything we need, we will use the stuff in space to make it happen.
The moon is the next thing. We're going back.
It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay.
Yeah, they were talking about on this one video, talking about how whenever you expand roads,
Make no mistake about this.
those
this is
get
not
used
gonna
a
get
lot
done
more.
By any one generation.
And again,
one of the
we
things that
have
we have to
traffic
do
jams.
Is inspire those future generations.
This vision of millions of people
Increased
living
supply
and working
becomes
in space for the benefit of
begets
Earth
increased demand.
is a very, very long-term vision.
It's gonna take generations.
We have to make sure that what we're doing today is setting up the next generation.
It's going to take all kinds of people.
Engineers, entrepreneurs, architects, artists, you, your children, your grandchildren.
This is kind of humanity's cathedral. You know, cathedrals took multiple generations of artisans and
T-minus
craftsmen and
22
masons
minutes
to
and
build.
counting.
There
One of
was
those
never
being
the
the Sagrada
expectation that
Familia.
One person would design
Talking about
and fully
cathedrals.
execute the vision.
That one is still
we
under
have
construction.
to inspire the next generation to carry this torch for the benefit of Earth.
For the benefit of Earth.
For the benefit of Earth.
We are Blue Origin.
And we will do all of this.
We'll do all of this.
For the benefit of Earth.
such an inspiring message. You know, actually our very name, Blue Origin, means Earth, right? So, you know, when our future generations
coming up on
are out there
midnight here on California,
looking back, they will look back at their blue origin, at Earth, right? And so we really need to protect this planet.
T-minus
The other
21 minutes
reason
and
why
counting.
I love our name, Blue Origin, is it means Earth. It means all of us. We are building these really cool, you know, pieces of space technology, not only just for one country, not only for one hemisphere. It really is for.
So how are we so far? We are.
world.
They have not added any time
why,
yet. Although watch
I
it
love
watch it happen.
that our company has this.
If they add it one more time, I'm
bigger,
ending the stream.
broader vision. You know, actually, before I took my current role, I was leading our commercial and international sales, and it was just really.
Because I could
nice
probably
to
make
get out
this.
there and
I
talk
mean,
to
if they
our
actually go all the way down to C0, I will actually
and
follow it
people from
as
around
long
the
as I
world in the
humanly
space
possibly
industry. I
can.
say big shout out to them
And
out there. If you guys are watching.
and once I'm done,
You know, and
once it gets to the
really
point, I will
talking to them
actually go ahead and go to
about
bed because I have to get
whether
up to
it's
work tomorrow.
New Glenn
T-minus 20 minutes
or
and
Blue
counting.
Ring or our lunar lander, what they can do and how they can take advantage of our technologies. I just love that we think broadly like that, and it's one of the many things that's kept me here at Blue. But I also want to talk, you know, obviously a main theme of that video there is this idea that as part of the long-term vision, we really need to protect this planet and the role of space technologies. What we're doing at Blue and what other organizations are doing around the world is so important because it is going to help protect Earth, right? And that's also why we start with reusable rockets and reusable rocket engines and the way that we're designing them to run on
And we'll see in a
propellants that
minute
are
how things
less
are going to
harmful
go.
to the
Probably
Earth,
within the
like
next 10
liquid
minutes, in
oxygen,
fact.
liquid hydrogen and LNG. We were just talking about that earlier.
T-minus
It's
19
so
minutes and counting.
important.
It gives me such a sense of pride because it really is about the everyday work that we do now and how that would impact
I
future
see. I think I also
generations.
see.
So all
I'm not
of
sure if
this
those are
is
fixed.
going to create a
Those are fixed aero
longer-term
surfaces
impact on
near the
Earth
base of the
that's truly
vehicle,
gonna benefit
but
humans
certainly
for
near the
future
top,
generations.
right around the
By
interstates.
focusing
Those
on
are
the
definitely
sustainability
movable
of our designs,
because
we're
they
really
need to be able
ensuring
to
that our
steer the
advancements in
vehicle as it
space
enters in the
technology do
as it
not
goes further down
come
in the
at the
atmosphere,
expense
where
of
the
our
air
home
has a bit
planet.
more
Yeah.
aerodynamic,
You know,
where those
just a
things
couple
have a
minutes
bit more
ago, we flew back
aerodynamic
to our
authority.
Our co-host Eddie out there at Cars Park, and again, talking about the multiple generations, how cool is it that he was there with the father-son pair that both work at Blue, plus the son's daughter that's there, and she's just going wild over space, and she can't wait to see, you know, this rocket launch. We have to think in that sort of generational.
T-minus 18 minutes
span,
and counting.
Right? There's also, you know, our teammate that's up in launch control. Who's,
I have to wonder
you know,
also how
whose
much supply
grandfather
they have
works,
of the
you know, on
various
Apollo, and here she is,
cryogenics,
pregnant.
notably
She's
liquid
pregnant in
hydrogen
the
and
photo,
liquid
like, who
liquid
knows
methane.
what her child is going to end up doing, and hopefully what we're doing here at Blue is going to benefit.
Round and round they
again,
talk. Yeah, I know. I know.
Building the road
I
to
know.
space. With these first initial steps tonight, you know, New Glenn. We're also talking about Blue Ring. Blue Ring is one of the first building blocks of the infrastructure that's up there in space, right? It's not just about the transportation, which is crucial, don't get me wrong, but then once we're up there, you know, we're going to need to support others, you know, in this case, you know, our customers, but also ourselves, when I say ourselves, Blue Origin and some of the missions we're doing, as we build our capabilities out there. There's
T-minus
by
17
definition,
minutes
space
and
is
counting.
infinite. And so if we can take advantage of that, and if we can put things up there that will help us take advantage of that, I mean,
for the benefit of Earth.
For the benefit of Earth, the future is bright.
The one thing I'm curious
Okay,
is how
with
they
that,
actually
we are
ignite
T-16
the
minutes and 40 seconds to go until launch.
when
Our
they
teams
how they
continue to
ignite the
get
engines.
aligned
I
and
know that
working on a
they on the
couple of issues. This is our
RS-25s
first launch. We need
and
that
I
extra
believe
time, we're
the
gonna give it to
Raptor
them.
engines they use a spark
Because
type
otherwise
setup.
speaking, this
They
team is
can't
ready
do
to
that with
rock and roll,
RP1
and
because
that
RP1 is a
rocket there
liquid
looks chilled
at
and ready to go to space.
at
So with
quote
that,
unquote
let's continue
room
to check out
temperature.
New Glenn on the pad, ready for NG-1.
Modbot, welcome. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the workshop and labs. I hope everything's going well for you. We're watching what's supposed to be the inaugural launch of Blue Origin's New Glenn on the NG-1 mission, taking part of a future item that they're going to use for their spaceborne infrastructure called Blue Ring, which is basically a bus type system where they can have communications, data storage, and all this other stuff on orbit. So they can talk with various other they can communicate with other satellites that Blue Origin has launched. And they're basically sending a building block up there that's going to actually stay attached to the top to the second stage for the duration of its mission. And I don't know if they're going to actually put it into the Earth's atmosphere once it's done, or if the orbit will just plain old decay. Although never a good idea to just let it decay. So we will see how things go. Unfortunately, they've been extending out the countdown for quite a while, T-minus 15 minutes and counting. Mainly because I guess they've been finding anomalies during the course. Kessler syndrome is bad. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually really happened yet, really, but it's let's hope it doesn't actually become an actual thing, because Kessler syndrome could make it almost impossible to send something out. What, you don't like to let garbage rain down on the unsuspecting people and or Kessler detritus? Oh goodness, yeah. Yeah. Just ask the Australians when Skylab re-entered. But yeah, good to finally see you here. I know I've seen you over on Luna's channel, and I just good to see you here. And I unfortunately regret that I didn't get to see you over at Offkai. T-minus 14 minutes and counting. Yeah, they've been adding they've been sending it back to T-minus 40 minutes multiple times since the start of the stream, which was right around 10 o'clock our time. But yeah, and of course there was more recently a Chinese booster that ended up re-entering the Earth's atmosphere uncontrolled into a I'm not sure if it went into a populated area, but it wasn't exactly a good look for the Chinese space program. But yeah, space detritus, I never thought of it that way. But I know that there are a whole bunch of projects that people are working on to deal with that whole concept. Oh no, not again! They're probably going to scrub it because, nope, 13 minutes. Never mind. I think they actually took time off the counter. That's a relief for now. But yeah, we've been talking about various bits of the space program, stuff historical and stuff upcoming throughout the entire stream. T0 looks like they may be scrubbing. We'll see in a minute, because it is just 3 past midnight, and it's supposed to be the close of their launch window. Let's see what they have to say, if anything. As I always say on my announcement tweets and posts, or whatever you want to call them nowadays, scrub disclaimers always apply. We both just got given momentary heart attacks. Yeah, indeed. Let's see what they have to say, assuming they even reset the clock. I'm starting to suspect they probably won't at this point, opting instead to essentially kick the whole launch schedule a couple days down the road. Once they, at least 2 days down the road, get past that weather constraint. We will know if they suddenly detank. Well, we'll see. They a lot of times what they'll probably do is go through a checklist before they detank anyway. I don't think it's going to be a sudden thing, unless you mean suddenly, meaning as in the RUD-ish type. RUD, of course, standing for random unscheduled random unscheduled disassembly. Usually in a catastrophic nature. We don't need that. When Starship launching tomorrow? I think it's going to be 2 p.m. local time here in California, 4 p.m. Central. I'd like a challenge. No engineer since 1986. Yeah, no kidding. I was alive when that happened. I was in high school when that happened. I didn't actually get to see it when it actually happened. I heard about it and then went to the library, and everybody's eyes were glued on the TV set. Good, I've got time to sleep. Okay. All right, well, okay, we'll see what happens there. I guess you're on the East Coast. But, of course, I will not be able to catch it because I will have half an hour until after I get... it'll be in half an hour until I get off work when it actually takes off, assuming it actually does take off on time, assuming it does take off at all. Because, you know, scrubs happen. So here it is, about 6 minutes after midnight here in California. In theory, if there was only a 2-hour launch window, it should have closed by now. And they haven't said anything yet on the stream as to what's going on. Now we got a couple of towers that have a flame that's burning off the evaporating LCH4 and LH2. Curiosity of mine is how they fuel the early Atlas rockets, which needed internal pressure to hold themselves up. You know, that's a good question. Especially as they're depleting their fuel supply. And from what I understand, the Centaurs only got stringers within the last 2 to 3 decades, and the Centaurs have been around for a very long time. They've been in operation since the 1960s. Yeah, because several Atlas rockets have actually collapsed when there was a fuel leak and they were starting to drain. Or at least they weren't properly filled up, and then basically it collapsed on itself. Also, fun fact, WD-40 was invented for Atlas. Yes, it was, in fact, invented for Atlas. Because they needed to be able to keep the vehicle from rusting. Or at least oxidizing in some form or another. I'm going to go check their Twitter right now just to see if any, because I think enough time has passed to the point where I can actually see what's happening. Well, they're saying, we're standing down on today's launch attempt to troubleshoot a vehicle subsystem issue that'll take us beyond our launch window. We're reviewing opportunities for our next launch attempt. So with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to mute this. I'm going to bring us back to the chatting window for a sec here. And I'm going to make a few changes to the stream before we sign off. Yeah, it has been, as always. Let me go ahead and make an update there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make that change on YouTube as well while I'm still thinking about it. I'm going to edit this real quick. Okay, save. I'm going to reload that page real quick. There we go. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining me, despite the fact that unfortunately things didn't exactly work out the way we hoped they would, mainly because a lot of issues have been happening. They actually have they have people coming up right now, but I think they basically said on the Twitter Twitter stream, Twitter page that what's going on. I'll retweet that in a bit. And thanks for the stream. As always, thank you so much for coming, Red Blue Fire. It's always good to have you here. And everyone else, it's great to have you folks here too. Thank you so much for joining me, even though it did not quite work out the way we hoped it would. So, and of course, as always, stuff like this always happens. We always have to deal with these things, and it's the nature of spaceflight and of course testing of hardware that ultimately finds itself in space. So in the meantime, we're gonna find ourselves we're gonna find someone to raid over on YouTube Twitch before we go to bed. Before I go to bed, pardon me. So let me open up. See who we can say hi to. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and close OBS Studio on the other computer. On this computer, rather, which is what was feeding the stream into the studio computer. But at least we got to talk a lot about how things work in terms of space flight. That is always something I enjoy doing, and getting a lot of you smart people in here talking. It is always so much fun to do. And on top of that, people who want to learn a thing or two coming in as well. And it's always good to talk with everybody here. And let's see. You know, I think we're going to join, okay. You know what I think I'm going to do? I don't think I've ever rated, or may have been a while since I've done this, but let me go. I think we're going to go check in with Lulu Murasaki. She is playing Dead by Daylight. Let's see. Okay. Let's go ahead and get that started. And actually, before that, let me go ahead and get the usual. Actually, let me do that real quick. Let me do forward. And I'm going to I've already got that set up. Let me go ahead and let me give you some raid text for those people who don't have subs, and for those who do have subs. There's one with one of my emotes on it. So, again, thank you so much for joining me. Let me go ahead and start the. Let's go ahead and get the raid prepped and ready to go. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I wish things had gone a little differently. And of course, as I always like to say, Slava Ukraini, and I hope to see you guys soon. I might come on tomorrow, seeing how things are going with Starship and Super Heavy on IFT7. I will probably have to do this as basically a replay. But in any event, I hope to see you guys then. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Have a good one in the meantime. Bye.